Hi everyone, we hope you're doing well. We're hanging in there though honestly, we haven't been getting much sleep lately. Today, we want to answer a question we get a lot: how do we publish our audiobooks? First, we post most audiobooks on Patreon as paid content. They stay paid for a few months. After that, they become free to listen to on Patreon forever. A few weeks later, we post them on other places like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, X. Lately, things have been a bit slow in terms of new members. So we'd love your help. Please share our site with your friends or in places like Facebook groups, Twitter, X, Discord, Reddit, or novel forums. Even one share can really help us grow. Thanks so much for your support. Using the knowledge they gained from him, mastered a strange form of natural energy. But after serving Cthulhu in the underground for so long, they began to resemble toads, losing their original serpent-like features. Of course, some serpent sorcerers escaped the curse by going into hibernation and later repopulated in caves. But after this event, the serpent people who worshipped Yig and those who worshipped Cthulhu became enemies, waging generational wars. By the way, your drooping inner eye corners are a unique trait of serpent people descendants. The old man pointed to Orochimaru's face, clearly directing his last remark to him. Orochimaru quickly touched his face, realizing that his inner eye corners were indeed more droopy than most people's. For a while, he had even felt like a freak because of this trait. But after hearing the old man's words, he felt certain that he was a freak. Could I be a serpent person? Are these coffins around me filled with my ancestors? And the serpent people who fled to the caves and became like toads, aren't they the snakes of Richi Cave and the toads of Mount Mayabaku? It turns out that the snakes of Richi Cave and the toads of Mount Mayabaku were once serpent people. Their conflict was caused by their differing beliefs. His mind buzzed as he learned all this. He recalled the final request made by the White Snake Sage. White Snake Sage, if Richi Cave were to go to war with Mount Mayabaku, you must fully assist us. At the time, Orochimaru didn't respond, instead turning and leaving. Because of this, the White Snake Sage called him a naive brat. So, there were deeper historical reasons behind the sage's request back then. Though he hadn't agreed to help, and the White Snake Sage hadn't taught him sage mode, she still allowed Orochimaru to stay in Richi Cave. During this time, Orochimaru tamed many snakes, including Manda, as his summoning beasts. He also developed numerous snake-related jutsu. Before leaving the cave, he even stole the White Snake Sage's secret treasure, the eight-headed serpent jutsu. This forbidden jutsu allows the user to transform into an eight-headed serpent. While it wasn't as powerful as the sage's own sage mode, it was still an S-class forbidden technique. The White Snake Sage, being aware of everything happening within Richi Cave, must have known about Orochimaru's theft. So why did the sage let him take it? The only explanation was that the White Snake Sage had recognized Orochimaru as a descendant of the serpent people. Standing on the steps, Abdullah's expression shifted slightly. I must go. As the old man's words fell, a bone-chilling gust blew in from the passage behind the room, like the fury of demons or the howling of evil spirits rushing towards the world beyond the bronze door. Orochimaru felt as if this ancient tomb of the serpent people, silent for countless years, had come to life. Looking in the direction of the wind, he saw figures emerging from the glow behind the bronze door, shaped like serpents. These winds weren't natural, they were the outlines of the serpent people, moving like demons in a nightmare, clad in armor. Their fierce snake heads occasionally glanced back at Orochimaru, locking eyes with his snake-like gaze. In that brief moment of eye contact, he witnessed a massive illusion, a gigantic head of the serpent people. Over time, the head and skin were morphing, and eventually, it took on a form identical to Orochimaru's own, with a sinister snake-like face. I am a serpent. I am one of the cursed serpent people. As the phantom vanished, his eyes refocused on Abdullah. The old man, though frail, stood firm in the violent winds, his traditional garments fluttering slightly. Countless serpent figures rushed past him, yet his body didn't waver. Slowly, the old man turned and followed the serpent figures toward the radiant space beyond the bronze door. As he moved, the light behind the door grew blinding, forcing Orochimaru and Kabuto to shield their eyes. As the old man's figure was swallowed by the light, Orochimaru shouted out his final question: what lies beyond the bronze door? The old man paused at the threshold, turning his head after 2 seconds of silence. Behind the door is the Watcher. With that, the old man continued into the world of light until his figure was completely consumed. At that moment, the last serpent-shaped wind entered the bronze door, and both the bronze door and a small door in the room began to close simultaneously. Orochimaru's eyes widened as he screamed, Yog-Sothoth is behind that door. In a frenzy, he raced toward the closing small door. But he was too slow. Just before his fingers could reach the edge, the door slammed shut, leaving no gap. Open the door. Open it. Bang! 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 He frantically pounded the small door with his snake-like arms, but despite his intense attacks, the door, though seemingly wooden, didn't budge. Only dust fell from the edges of the door frame. Kabuto, watching in confusion, couldn't understand why Orochimaru had become so obsessed after hearing the word Watcher. What exactly was this Watcher? Regardless, he dared not interrupt Orochimaru in his current state, choosing instead to wait for him to calm down. After a long while, Orochimaru finally exhausted himself. His snake limb slowly retracted into his sleeves, and he slumped to the ground, staring at the door that stood as an impassable barrier to his dreams of reaching the other side. Seeing Orochimaru calm down, Kabuto cautiously helped him to a corner to rest, offering him a food pill for recovery. In silence, they eventually began their journey back. Kabuto walked ahead, deep in thought, unaware until Orochimaru's quiet exclamation caught his attention. The neatly arranged coffins that had lined the walls were now empty. Not only that, but all the coffin lids had been slightly moved, as if something had opened from inside. The once occupied coffins, with their precious metals and adornments, were now devoid of both treasure and the serpent people corpses. Could it be that the serpent-shaped winds weren't mere illusions, but real serpent people? Only now did Kabuto realize the truth in Orochimaru's earlier words: "We live on a small, peaceful island of ignorance, surrounded by an infinite sea of blackness. If we insist on setting sail, even though we might feel unharmed for now, someday all the seemingly unrelated pieces of knowledge will come together. And that knowledge will lead us into terrifying, surreal visions that our minds cannot deny. Our only hope is to maintain our sanity when those moments come." As they walked on, they noticed one coffin that remained untouched. All the other lids had been slightly ajar, but this one was still perfectly sealed. Orochimaru, recalling the serpent corpses, realized it would make a perfect research specimen. He ordered Kabuto to open it. As the lid slowly opened, they found no serpent body inside, only a single, slight rise in the coffin's bottom. On that rise lay a book with a red cover. The Necronomicon. Chapter 161, The Undead Duo, Sacrifice. Hey! Want to join the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign? A young boy with slick-back gray hair jumped nimbly down from a post, holding a massive three-bladed crimson scythe in reverse grip. Me? Are you talking to me? A man dressed as a woodcutter looked around and, seeing no one else, pointed to himself in confusion. Yeah. Want to join the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign? The woodcutter dismissed the boy's suggestion with a smile, shaking his head. Where did this kid come from? I don't have time to play games with you. If you want to play, find someone else. I'm leaving. The woodcutter assumed the boy's exaggerated scythe was just a toy and began walking away. But before he had taken 2 steps, a chilling voice came from behind him. What a shame. Guess I'll have to take you to meet our Dark Lord. Before the woodcutter could react, everything went black, and he passed out. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself in a dimly lit area with a giant bonfire burning in front of him. Terrified by the flames, he tried to sit up and move away, only to realize he was tied up. Panicked, he scanned the area and saw at least a dozen others bound just like him. Behind him stood figures in black robes, their faces obscured. The woodcutter looked over his shoulder and saw the boy from earlier standing behind him, still holding the massive crimson scythe. At that moment, the woodcutter's mind raced, unable to process what kind of situation he was in. Without thinking, he fell to his knees, pleading for mercy. Please spare me. I'm just a woodcutter. I don't have any money. The woodcutter mistook the boy and the robed figures for kidnappers. The boy initially ignored him but, unable to bear the constant begging, finally turned and said, It's not up to me. Only the Dark Lord can decide your fate. Ah, here he comes. Following the boy's gaze, the woodcutter saw a shadow slowly creeping through the forest. Though the shadow hadn't fully emerged from the darkness, it had already spread an aura of death. As it moved closer, everyone finally saw the indescribable form, a writhing mass of black flesh with subtle movements, its skin wrinkling unnervingly. At the top of this mass was a large black tentacle, tipped with a suction cup, ringed with tiny spikes. Ah! The moment the captives laid eyes on the being, they screamed in horror. Even in their darkest nightmares, they had never encountered such a monstrous form. This strange entity was none other than the dark god worshipped by the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign, and the form it took when devouring sacrifices, the feaster from afar. To keep track of the movements of the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign in real time, Kagami used a yellow sign. When a follower of the King in Yellow held the yellow sign, they could use it to summon him. However, if someone who was not a follower held it, they would be hunted by the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign. The yellow sign, in its normal state, was just an ordinary yellow mark, often touched by the unaware in their daily lives without realizing its significance. It only reacted when the King in Yellow, his servants, or his creatures were nearby. The yellow sign also functioned as a medium for communication between followers and the King in Yellow or between followers themselves. Although he was not a follower of the King in Yellow, holding the yellow sign prevented Hidan from sensing him. This might have been because Kagami was under the protection of the Avatar, which blocked such detection. However, if the sign left his possession, it could change things. At that moment, he heard Hidan's call through the yellow sign. The voice initially fluctuated, distant and raspy, but after listening carefully, it became clear. "O great evil god, King in Yellow, heed the call of your most devoted follower, Hidan. Please descend upon the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign, we will offer you the grandest of sacrifices. Evil god. Evil god." Along with Hidan's voice, Kagami could faintly hear the voices of other Brotherhood members echoing in unison. These voices flowed continuously through the yellow sign into his mind, but the feaster from afar had already responded. Though both were avatars of the Great Old Ones, Kagami could attach his thoughts to Haster's avatar and control its actions with his mind. This was something he couldn't do with Spidey, unable to stop it from spinning webs or force it to do other tasks. When he attached his thoughts to the feaster from afar, a sacrificial scene unfolded in his mind. In a mountain forest of the Land of Hot Water, a massive bonfire illuminated a large clearing. On the outer edge of the fire, more than 20 members of the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign, dressed in black robes, stood apart. Closer to the fire, more than 20 bound people were lying on the ground. Judging by their attire, they seemed to be ordinary people captured from the area, the offerings for the ritual. Since Hidan's summoning through the yellow sign had received a response from the evil god, the chanting stopped, and the followers stood silently by the fire, waiting. With the offerings prepared, Kagami decided not to delay and immediately controlled the feaster from afar to fly towards the bonfire. Descriptions of the feaster from afar were vague, and no one has ever drawn its appearance accurately. It was only described as a black flying entity covered in folds, with tentacles and claws. When he controlled this avatar, he finally saw the true form of the feaster from afar. In short, it was a mass of black, shapeless slime. Its surface constantly rippled like the surface of water, which had led some to mistake these ripples for folds of skin. It had tentacles, claws, and could fly, thanks to its amorphous nature, similar to that of a shoggoth. However, unlike the shoggoth, whose shape-shifting was a response to please its master, taking on human or animal forms in an instant, the feaster from afar maintained a relatively stable shape, only forming tentacles, blade-like claws, or giant wings when needed, with its core form remaining mostly unchanged. As Kagami controlled the feaster from afar in flight, he faintly heard the sound of wings flapping nearby. Turning his gaze, he saw 4 Byakes flying alongside him. Byakes, the familiars of Haster, were an interstellar species capable of traversing the cosmos. They resembled large monstrous birds with bat-like wings. At that moment, the 4 Byakes followed closely on either side of the feaster from afar, showing the humility of servants. Their bat-like wings flapped without ever overtaking the feaster from afar. Kagami realized that when the feaster from afar responds to sacrificial summoning, the Byakes sometimes descend as well. However, their combat abilities are not particularly strong, as they are made of earthly matter and vulnerable to physical attacks. Most often, Byakes were used as mounts, granted to followers by the King in Yellow for travel. In Kagami's controlled descent, the feaster from afar glided from the sky and landed steadily in the forest. The 4 Byakes followed suit, humbly trailing behind. He avoided descending too dramatically, as scaring too many of the offerings to death right away wasn't ideal. However, as the feaster from afar emerged from the dark woods, it still terrified some of the sacrifices instantly. A cold wind blew across their faces, and they perceived the air around them condensing. The black, non-human entity embodying all their fears approached with clawed hands like blades. These ordinary people, lacking strong mental fortitude, lost all sanity at the sight of the feaster from afar's true form, frantically smashing their heads against the ground. Seeing that the offerings were trying to commit suicide, the nearby followers rushed forward to restrain them, preventing self-harm. Some even forcibly pried open their eyes, making them continuously stare at the true visage of the evil god worshipped by the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign. Hey! They are offerings to the evil god. Don't let them kill themselves. Hidan, standing by the bonfire, seemed to be calmly giving orders, but if you looked closely at his expression, you could see that his fanatical gaze had never left the feaster from afar. Under the control of numerous followers, the offerings were restrained one by one. Kagami controlled the black form of the feaster from afar, slowly walking toward the first offering. This offering was a man dressed in coarse clothes, his thin frame now completely lifeless, his dazed eyes void of any light, and his body as limp as a puppet, manipulated by the follower behind him. His lower clothing was soaked in some unknown liquid. At this moment, an option appeared in front of Kagami's eyes: sacrifice, or follower. This was one of the powers of haster. When accepting a sacrifice from a follower, only one could be consumed, either the sacrifice or the follower. Of course, after the sacrifice, he could choose to kill whichever side remained. But at the moment of accepting the offering, only one choice could be made. Faced with a loyal follower who was a useful ninja on one hand, and a stranger who had already gone mad on the other, Kagami naturally chose to accept the sacrifice. Having made the decision, the black tendril atop the feaster from afar slowly rose, swaying like a branch in the wind, and rested upon the offering's head. At the moment of contact, circular blades surrounding the suction cups on the tendril sliced open the victim's scalp and skull, consuming the brain within. The brain matter was slowly absorbed into the feaster from afar, the tendril pulsing rhythmically as Kagami's mind gained new information. As the brain was consumed, the soul energy from the offering was absorbed. The man known as Maid had already completely lost his sanity, devoid of any remaining reason. Normally, no more soul power could be gained. However, haster's power allowed the consumption of brain matter to yield soul energy regardless. Masao Kozaka's brain had been sucked dry, his body collapsing weakly as the tendril released him. The entire sacrificial process wasn't overly gory, with little blood spilled, as the feaster from afar acted with a certain gentleness when the offering didn't resist. To the watching followers, the feaster from afar appeared as a refined lady delicately sipping a drink through a straw, maintaining elegance. After finishing the first offering, Kagami proceeded to accept several more. These offerings, like the first, were all civilians from the land of hot water kidnapped by nearby followers. However, with the sixth offering and follower, something was different. The sixth offering was a woman, her appearance above average, her figure wrapped in a kimono. Kagami didn't know where this follower had abducted the offering, but from the woman's face, frozen in an expression of terror, and her still chest, it was clear she had died. This woman had been literally scared to death by the sight of the feaster from afar. Sacrifice, or follower. Sacrifice. Even though the offering had already died of fright, he still chose to consume her as a sacrifice. Yet, as the tendril absorbed the woman's brain, no soul energy was gained. It became clear that if the offering died before the sacrifice, no soul power could be harvested. This was unacceptable. If the followers started offering dead bodies to cheat Kagami out of soul energy, what use were they? This required punishment. Kagami controlled the feaster from afar's tendril to fling the woman's corpse aside, then swiftly impaled the follower's head with the tendril. Before the follower could react, the top of his skull was opened, his body twitching as if struck by lightning. The surrounding followers were startled by the sudden change, hurriedly checking to see if their prepared offerings were still alive. Hidan, however, watching the scene, was not disturbed but instead screamed with fanatic joy. "Serves you right. Serves you right." The follower's brain was completely drained, but Kagami gained no soul energy. It seemed only the brain of the selected offering could provide soul power, while other actions merely counted as regular attacks from the feaster from afar. In the end, when Kagami finished absorbing the final offering, 2 followers were killed for presenting offerings that had already died, while the rest of the sacrifices were consumed as expected. This seemed to be the punishment mechanism of the ritual. If Kagami was dissatisfied with the sacrifices, the followers would be killed. But where there was punishment, there should be rewards as well. With this in mind, he summoned the Byakis from the forest. These bat-winged monstrous birds emerged from the woods, stunning all the followers. Standing on 2 legs but rhythmically beating their wings, these creatures were unlike any known animal: ravens, moles, vultures, ants, or even decaying human corpses. Nothing could compare. They were beings no ordinary person would want to remember. Yet, as the followers saw the creatures, their minds were filled with knowledge of them. They were Byakis, servants of the King in Yellow, granted as mounts to followers who had made significant contributions. Under Kagami's command, one of the Byaki walked slowly to Hidan, bowing its head to allow him to mount. This. Kneeling on the ground, Hidan glanced at the obedient Byaki, then looked up at the feaster from afar. "Is this for me?" Kagami, controlling the blurred head of the feaster from afar that looked more like a mound of earth than a neck, gave a slight nod. This small gesture of approval sent waves of ecstatic shivers through Hidan's brainstem. "Ha. I've been blessed by the evil god. Praise the evil god. Praise the great king in yellow. Praise the feaster from afar." Hidan continued to bow fervently, his scalp scraping against the rough ground until it bled. But the feaster from afar had already left with the remaining 3 Byaki. Chapter 162, The Undead Duo, The Fight. I couldn't find his body. Sasori and Deodara were reporting on their mission to hunt down Orochimaru. Although they went with confidence, they ultimately returned in defeat. From their mission report, they encountered Orochimaru in the Land of Wind. During the battle with Sasori, Orochimaru summoned the deceased third Kazekage to fight against the puppet of the same Kazekage. The battle ended in a stalemate. In the end, due to Orochimaru's jutsu being seemingly incomplete, and with Deidara's art destroying his hideout, they speculated that he had survived. Orochimaru's choice of the Land of Wind must have a purpose. What is it? Itachi thought about the Sanin's motives for fleeing there. Do you have any idea what jutsu it was, Itachi? I believe it was the Impure World Reincarnation Jutsu. It revives the dead and allows the user to control them. It can only be stopped by sealing or overpowering the revived. Can't we just kill Orochimaru? Deidara asked. Even if you kill him, the reincarnated bodies won't stop. What? Itachi's explanation prompted Pain to issue an order: keep an eye on Orochimaru's movements. As long as he's alive, he will make more moves. This order was essentially letting Orochimaru off the hook for now, since Pain's original reason for inviting Orochimaru to join Akatsuki had already been achieved. Now that the Sannin possessed such a troublesome jutsu, rather than wasting manpower to help Hidden Leaf Village hunt down the rogue ninja, it made more sense to continue with the next phase of their plan. Speaking of immortality, there's another one. The only female member of Akatsuki spoke, shifting the topic. It's a commission from the Land of Hot Water. They say a cult has recently emerged with a large number of murderous fanatics, and they want Akatsuki to eliminate them. Aren't there ninjas from the Hidden Hot Water Village there? Kakazu asked. Most of the cult members are actually ninjas from the Hidden Hot Water Village. They've apparently mastered some strange jutsu, which is why the village can't handle them. Strange jutsu? Immortality? In response to Itachi's question, Konan shook her head. Only one of them possesses immortality, but all of them use some bizarre sacrificial jutsu. The information from the Land of Hot Water suggests avoiding fighting them at night. When the trio of Itachi, Kakazu, and Konan arrived in the Land of Hot Water, they found a corpse by the roadside in the forest during the day. It was a passing civilian, with all personal belongings intact, and no signs of assault on the body, except for a hole in the top of the head. Upon looking inside, the brain had been completely drained. Next to the body, a strange symbol drawn in blood caught Itachi's attention. It was a peculiar symbol with 3 tentacles, formed from simple dots and lines, exuding an aura of heresy through its irregular extensions. If it were for money, I could understand. But to kill for neither money nor revenge, just for the sake of killing, it's definitely a cult. As Kakazu analyzed, he bent down to search the corpse's clothes, finally pulling out a few small bills after some time, which he then pocketed. Isn't that wrong? Seeing this, Konan frowned slightly, disapproving of Kakazu's habit of taking money from the dead. What's the problem? Money is money, even from a dead person. It can still be spent. I manage all Akatsuki's finances, you know. If it weren't for someone like me, the organization would have long fallen into a financial crisis. Am I right? As Kakazu and Konan, Akatsuki's moneymaker and spender, bickered, Itachi pointed to the ground beside them, changing the subject. Look, this symbol must be the cult's emblem. There are only 2 reasons to leave a mark like this in such a place. One is to make people aware of their presence, creating a sense of fear. The other could be related to sacrificial rituals. If it's a ritual, there should be more sacrificial marks left on the ground. And the method of opening the skull and removing the brain, it's too specific for mere killing. So, this unusual killing method is likely related to the sacrifice. He calmly analyzed the situation, causing Kakazu to glare at him in mild irritation. You really get on my nerves. So, are you here to keep an eye on me, afraid I'll kill Itachi? Konan shook her head. This mission is just a probe, not a direct battle with the cult, which is why I'm here as bait. Bait? On a quiet mountain road, Konan walked with her eyes closed. Though her lip piercings and violet eyes stood out in the otherwise simple Land of Hot Water, her natural beauty was still hard to ignore. Perhaps that's why Pain chose her as the bait. She was the only one in Akatsuki who looked like a normal person inside and out. As she walked, a young man sitting on a roadside stump suddenly called out to her. Yo, Auntie. Konan opened her eyes and looked at the boy. He was about Itachi's age but seemed unusually energetic. The fanaticism in his eyes was the exact opposite of Uchiha's usual cold demeanor. The spirited young man jumped down from the stump, holding a bloody scythe, and stood in front of Konan. Want to join the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign? Brotherhood? Conan's expression soured. Being called auntie was bad enough, but being invited to join a brotherhood was even worse. I'm a woman. She replied with a dark face, her displeasure growing to the point that even Nagato wouldn't dare look her in the eye. But the naive, zealous youth didn't seem to notice her irritation and continued to enthusiastically explain. It doesn't matter. Our Lord doesn't discriminate by gender. Whether male or female, anyone can join the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign. As long as you make sacrifices, he will reward you. What do you think? Pretty good doctrine, right? Want to join our Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign? No. Looks like I'll just have to sacrifice you. Hidan aimed his bloody scythe at Conan, but suddenly, two protectors rushed in from either side and stood guard by her. This must be one of those cult members, but I can't tell yet if he is the immortal one. Let me test if he really is immortal. Kakazu volunteered to test Hidan, but the boy remained utterly unfazed by the sudden appearance of the three individuals. He even started joking. Who are you guys? Wearing the same clothes, are you a band? That gloomy guy over there must be the bassist, the girl in the middle is the lead vocalist. Wait, no, this guy must be the lead singer, right? His indifferent attitude further angered Kakazu, who stepped forward darkly and said, "We're not a band. We're here to take your life." Hidan's expression became a bit more serious after Kakazu's intimidation. "With a sacrifice like you, the Lord will be pleased." With that, he charged at Kakazu with his scythe, while Conan and Itachi quickly leaped onto a nearby tree to observe the battle. His combat style wasn't particularly complex, he just wielded his scythe, slashing horizontally and vertically as he chased Kakazu. Ha ha ha. What's the matter? Only know how to run? Don't think you can escape. Suddenly, he stomped the ground hard, leaping into the air and swinging his scythe toward his enemy. Kakazu, however, calmly raised his hand, and the black threads between his arm and fist quickly unraveled. His fist shot out like an extended tentacle, striking Hidan's unguarded body head-on. Splat! The power of Kakazu's tentacle punch was immense, piercing his body with a clenched fist. Hidan's attack halted midair, and his body fell to the ground as Kakazu retracted his tentacle. Is that it? Over already? This cult member wasn't that tough after all. Looks like we'll need you to be bait again, Kakazu said to Conan on the tree. Their mission had been to capture one of the cultists to interrogate them about the cult's numbers and sacrificial techniques. Conan, however, frowned slightly. You intended to kill him from the start. But just as Kakazu thought the battle was over, Hidan slowly got back up. Damn it! That punch hurt like hell. Seeing Hidan slowly rise, Kakazu's eyes widened in surprise. He had aimed for the heart, with no intention of leaving him alive. I'll sacrifice you to the Lord. He scraped the blood spilled from his wound onto the ground with his foot and skillfully drew a pattern. The design was a circle, with 3 twisted tendrils spiraling outwards, which looked hastily drawn. But Itachi recognized it immediately. It was the same mark they'd found at a previous murder scene. What is this symbol? Before Hidan could continue, Kakazu's tentacle punched through his body again, but this time he didn't fall. It seems the rumors of immortality are true, Kakazu noted, slightly shocked. But as he withdrew his tentacle, Hidan grabbed hold of it, drawing blood onto his hand. All right. The ritual begins. A smile crept onto Hidan's face as he licked Kakazu's blood off his hand. Suddenly, his skin turned into a pattern of black and white, resembling a grotesque skeletal figure. But the most shocking thing wasn't just his transformation. Above Hidan's head, a massive black tentacle began to materialize, slowly rising. The shadowy appendage, slightly distorted under the sunlight, seemed somewhat unreal. What is that thing? Conan exclaimed in shock. Hidan gleefully declared, "This is the great god we worship. He is the ultimate evil god in this world. The great king in yellow. Ha 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 ha. You will all become sacrifices for him." Hearing his crazed proclamation, Itachi couldn't help but recall another man who claimed the existence of evil gods, Kojiro. Kojiro belonged to the esoteric order of Dagon, and this guy was from the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign. That madman also worshipped a god called the Great Cthulhu. Could Kojiro be connected to this cult? The black tentacle above Hidan's head continued to rise and expand, growing as large as a towering tree. This tentacle came from the feaster from afar, summoned through a blood ritual using both his and his victim's blood, along with the yellow sign. However, the entire being could only be summoned at night, so Hidan could only call forth this one tentacle during the day. But even one tentacle was far more powerful than any ordinary summoned animals. Sacrifice, or follower. Sacrifice. Upon judgment, the black tentacle shot towards the enemy's body, and before the shocked Kakazu could dodge, the suction cup at the tip of the tentacle had already clamped onto his head. Sacrifice. Begins. As he saw Hidan smirking from afar, he felt the cold, sharp sensation atop his head and quickly realized what was coming. Desperately, he formed hand seals. Earth style, iron skin. The technique gave Kakazu some comfort. This jutsu hardened the skin using chakra, greatly increasing its defense and enhancing his physical strength. While it came with some mobility drawbacks, no physical attack, save for lightning techniques, had ever broken this defense. Though he didn't know what kind of sacrificial technique Hidan was using, as long as the black tentacle couldn't penetrate his hardened skin, it couldn't hurt him. But Kakazu's momentary sense of relief was shattered by a faint cracking sound from above. The sound was subtle, but due to bone conduction, it was incredibly clear. Impossible. What is this tentacle? As Kakazu recalled the corpse they'd found with its skull cracked open and its brain sucked dry, fear gripped his heart. For the first time since mastering the Earth Grudge Fear technique, he felt the presence of death. Chapter 163, The Undead Duo. Joining. If there is any sound in this world that is the most terrifying, it must be the sound of one's own skull slowly breaking. Kakazu heard exactly that kind of sound. Because his skin had been hardened by the iron skin technique, the sound of his skin cracking was disturbingly similar to that of a skull shattering. He couldn't judge how much of his defenses had been penetrated by the tentacle above his head, but he knew that if this continued, his skull would eventually be opened up, and his brain would be sucked out, leaving him like an empty coconut shell. Although his Earth Grudge Fear technique granted him 5 hearts, essentially 5 lives, he still only had 1 head. If it was gone, there wouldn't be any replacement for that. Realizing this, Kakazu's fear surged. His only thought was to throw off the tentacle wrapped around his head. However, due to using the iron skin, his movements were heavily restricted, and he couldn't run away. His only option was to use ninjutsu to eliminate the tentacles. With that in mind, he quickly unlocked the restraints on his back and transformed into the Earth Grudge Fear mode. His cloak bulged, and 4 black figures burst out from behind him, standing at his rear. These 4 figures were entirely composed of dense black threads, and each one wore a white mask on its head. In this mode, these 4 black figures could use 4 different types of ninjutsu. With his one and only head under threat, Kakazu didn't hesitate to use his trump card. Wind style, pressure damage. He had absorbed the hearts of people with 4 different chakra natures in addition to his own earth nature, giving him access to all 5 chakra natures. According to the principles of chakra nature affinities, his iron skin, weak against lightning. Thus, Kakazu deduced that Hidan's tentacle might have been lightning-based. Since wind countered lightning, he chose to use wind style to suppress the black tentacle's nature. However, what he didn't expect was that the high-pressure wind hit the black tentacle without causing even the slightest reaction. It didn't even scratch the surface. What? Lightning style, false darkness. Fire style, searing migraine. Water style, water wall. In a panic, he abandoned any thoughts of nature affinities and threw every ninjutsu he had at the black tentacle. The 4 black figures in midair unleashed fire, water, lightning, and wind, creating a chaotic battlefield. Yet despite the onslaught, the black tentacle remained completely unharmed. Useless. Useless. The Lord's tentacles are not something your petty ninjutsu can destroy. Just give up and become a sacrifice to him. On the other end of the tentacle, Hidan was shaking his body, laughing maniacally, while the tentacle extending from his head trembled slightly. Have you figured it out yet? Conan, standing on a branch watching the battle, asked Itachi. He licked Kakazu's blood. That's likely his sacrificial ninjutsu. That black tentacle must be something he summoned. Its ability seems to be breaking open the opponent's head and sucking out their brains. But the problem is the nature of that tentacle is unclear. Kakazu's ninjutsu isn't having any effect on it. Conan glanced at Itachi's eyes and asked, can't even your Sharingan see through that tentacle? Sorry, it can't. Even though Itachi couldn't see through what the tentacle was, it stirred a vague sense of familiarity within him. It was similar to the tentacle that bound him in his nightmares, the one that haunted his dreams almost every night. The 2 tentacles were nearly identical. Except the one in his dreams bound his body, while this one directly extracted brains. The method was different, but the resemblance was uncanny. While Conan and Itachi were still watching from the tree, Kakazu was on the verge of collapse. Crack, crack. Ah! Hearing the sound growing closer to his brain, his mind was nearing its limit. Conan, seeing this, quickly turned to Itachi. Looks like he can't hold out any longer. Think of a way to separate them quickly. Although his ninjutsu is sacrificial, it looks more like a possession-type summoning jutsu. If we can kill the user, the technique might be undone. But he's immortal. Kakazu's screams were getting more desperate, and it wouldn't be surprising if his defenses gave out any second. Itachi took a deep breath and said, I'll try using a Ganjutsu to knock him out. He had considered this earlier, but after the backlash he suffered from using Tsukaimi on Kojiro, he had been hesitant to use Ganjutsu carelessly, especially against someone involved with a cult or an evil god. But the situation was dire, and he had no other choice. He leaped down from the tree, landing beside the cultist. Hidan was watching Kakazu's desperate struggle with great interest. When he noticed Itachi suddenly appear, he waved dismissively and said impatiently, You'll be sacrificed to the Lord later. Go away, go away. Itachi ignored. Hey. Instinctively, Hidan looked at him, accidentally locking eyes with Itachi's Sharingan. Suddenly, he felt his mind becoming foggy, and with a thud, he collapsed, unconscious. When Hidan woke up, he found himself tied up tightly. Hey, why not just kill him? Akatsuki is short on manpower right now. I intend to have him join us as a member. This brat. Kakazu and Conan were arguing when Itachi noticed Hidan had awakened and warned them, he's awake. Conan immediately explained her plan to invite Hidan to join Akatsuki, but Hidan quickly rejected the idea. Are you kidding me? I don't care about your Akatsuki. My mission is to lead my brothers in spreading our teachings to the world. Hearing this, Kakazu immediately tried to stir the pot. See, I told you, we should kill him. If you can kill me, go ahead and try. Despite being tied up, Hidan remained defiant, glaring at Kakazu with hostility. Try? Fine, I will. Kakazu, still furious from his earlier torment, wasn't backing down either. Come at me then. Watching the escalating confrontation, Conan was at a loss, unsure how to continue persuading Hidan to join the Akatsuki. At that moment, Itachi, usually reserved, stepped forward and asked, Hey, are you a believer of the evil god? The mention of his god instantly revitalized Hidan, and he proudly nodded, of course. He is the most powerful, ultimate god in this world. Itachi nodded as if in agreement but then added, but I know someone who worships a god even stronger than yours. What? Hidan's eyes flared with rage, far more intense than during his argument with Kakazu. Impossible. No god is stronger than the king in yellow. That's absolutely impossible. I'm warning you, your Genjutsu might be impressive, but don't you dare insult the Lord. If you do, before Hidan could finish, Itachi interrupted him with two simple words. Cthulhu. The god that person worships is called Cthulhu. As soon as Itachi mentioned Cthulhu, something about Hidan's aura changed dramatically, as if he had become a different person entirely. Although he and Kakazu had been at each other's throats earlier, Hidan's strange tentacle jutsu nearly killing Kakazu, he had never before shown such a serious and focused demeanor. Because of his immortality, Hidan had always adopted a playful, indifferent attitude toward both his own life and the lives of others. He never took anything too seriously, and his immature mindset contributed to this. But now, his aura had shifted from that of a fanatical zealot who constantly spoke of his god, to someone brimming with cold, murderous intent toward a true mortal enemy. Sitting on the ground, Hidan buried his head for a while before speaking in a low voice, Where is he? What? The moment Itachi responded, Hidan shot him a glare, raising his voice, The one who worships Cthulhu. Where is he? I'm going to kill him. I'll kill him. No. I'll sacrifice him to the king in yellow. Tell me where that person is. Moments ago, Hidan had been silent, but now he was frantically muttering kill him over and over, leaving Itachi confused. Why did Hidan hate Kojiro so much? Could they have known each other in the past? But Kojiro was from Kiri, far from the land of hot water where Hidan was from. And given the large age gap between them, there shouldn't have been much overlap. Was it purely because of their different beliefs? But weren't all evil gods, by nature, evil? If the difference was based on belief, then their situations were quite similar, both were followers of dark, evil gods. Even Itachi couldn't make sense of the full situation, so he asked, Why do you want to kill him? Hidan, unbothered by the question, answered straightforwardly, he worships the king in yellow's enemy. He is the brother and mortal enemy of the king in yellow. The enemy of the Lord is my enemy. Anyone who believes in the enemy of the Lord is my enemy. I must punish him. After Hidan's explanation, Itachi understood a bit more. Orochimaru's mention of the Great Old Ones had indicated that they weren't a united front, there were rivalries among them. The god Hidan worshipped, the king in yellow, was apparently one of these Great Old Ones, and his relationship with Cthulhu worshipped by Kojiro was one of both brotherhood and enmity. Though this relationship seemed contradictory, he could understand. If the Black Pharaoh and Aku Shinkage hadn't appeared on the night of the Uchiha massacre, Itachi would have been the one to kill his parents. That would have made Sasuke both his brother and his mortal enemy. This enmity between gods extended to their followers, with the disciples of one god seeing the followers of the rival god as mortal enemies. If Hidan thought this way, then did Kojiro as well? As Itachi pondered this connection, nearby Conan and Kakazu looked completely lost. What evil gods? What enemies? What are you talking about? Kakazu, despite trying to act wise, didn't understand. This has nothing to do with you. Hidan snapped back. You little brat. Conan looked at Itachi, noticing that he seemed to understand something, and asked, What's going on? Itachi gave a simplified explanation. During a mission to the land of gods with Juzo, I encountered someone claiming to be a follower of an evil god. And our prisoner has a grudge with him. Conan, uninterested in who worshipped which evil god, instead saw this as an opportunity to recruit Hidan into the Akatsuki. Do you think you could use this information to persuade him to join Akatsuki? I can try. While they discussed quietly, Hidan, already growing impatient, yelled, Hey! What are you whispering about over there? Hurry up and tell me who that person is. I need to punish him. With their conversation concluded, Itachi approached Hidan. You keep saying you want to punish him, but I don't think you can beat him. How do you plan to punish him? What? You think I can't beat him? Impossible. Hidan was incredulous. Itachi continued, your strength comes from your immortality and that strange tentacle jutsu. Sacrifice. It's a sacrificial ritual. Hidan corrected him sharply. Whatever it is. But you couldn't even defeat my Genjutsu. How do you think you can defeat him? Not only did he defeat my Genjutsu, but he also instantly killed one of my comrades with a single blow in a hand-to-hand fight. If you go against him with your current strength, you'll be walking to your death. Even if you can't die, what if he cuts you into pieces and buries them all over? You'd be completely powerless, wouldn't you? Itachi wasn't exaggerating. He had indeed lost to Kojiro in a mental duel with Tsukimi, and Juzo had nearly been killed in one strike. While Hidan's summoned tentacle was strange, his actual combat ability wasn't very strong. If he faced Kojiro in his transformed state, Itachi believed Kojiro would have a much higher chance of victory. And he wasn't alone either. By the way, how many people are in your brotherhood? Hidan, caught off guard by the question and not particularly bright, answered honestly. Fewer than 30. Upon hearing this, Itachi deliberately smiled, as if he had just heard a hilarious joke. What are you laughing at? What's so funny? Sorry, I just found it amusing because the difference in numbers is so large. What? How many followers does that person's god have? Hidan asked, still unconvinced. Itachi pretended to think for a moment and replied, it's not that many. If you include civilians and deep ones, maybe just a few thousand. Don't worry, it won't exceed 100,000. The sheer difference in numbers left Hidan, Kakazu, and Conan deeply shocked. A few thousand, or even tens of thousands, was the population of a small nation. Damn it. How does his evil god have so many followers? Though Hidan's tone was still defiant, his expression showed a hint of defeat. Now you see, with your current strength, you're not ready to challenge him. At that moment, Conan interjected at just the right time, so you should join Akatsuki. That person killed our comrade before. We want revenge too, but we aren't strong enough yet. But if you join us, along with your brotherhood, we'll have a better chance of challenging them. However, we need to build up our strength first. Hidan was tempted by Conan's words. Okay, fine, but just so you know, even if I join, I'm not going to stop spreading my religion or making sacrifices. Of course. Internally, Conan was pleased. This guy was easy to manipulate. At her command, Kakazu reluctantly untied Hidan. Hidan stood up, stretched his limbs, and pulled out a necklace from under his collar, clutching the pendant in his hand and bringing it to his mouth. What are you doing? Kakazu asked. I'm going to report to the Lord about joining Akatsuki. I need to see if he approves. Conan, slightly annoyed, said, you already agreed to join. I agreed, but he needs to approve. Hidan shouted at her, then continued whispering to the yellow pendant in his hand. Through the gap between his fingers, Itachi saw that the pendant had the same symbol Hidan had drawn with blood on the ground earlier. After a while, Hidan finally tucked the necklace back under his collar. Alright, he has approved. Let's go. Itachi glanced curiously at the necklace swinging under Hidan's collar but didn't think much of it. That thing couldn't actually communicate with a god, right? If it did, he would be curious to hear what a god's voice sounded like. Chapter 164, The Undead Duo, Bounty at Akatsuki Initiation Ceremony. Hidan personally slashed a line through his forehead protector, then draped the Akatsuki cloak over his shoulders. I still have to continue the activities of the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign as usual. That's the condition I agreed upon with that woman. The woman Hidan referred to was naturally Conan, and he directed this statement toward the leader of Akatsuki, Pain. Pain didn't bother with such minor details and simply replied, do as you wish. The members of Akatsuki were rogue ninjas who gathered for various personal reasons. He never intended to unite them like a close-knit family. As long as he could use them to complete his plans, that was enough. Pain himself was the glue that held Akatsuki together. In nature, the weak submit to the strong, and this principle applied within Akatsuki as well. He held absolute strength, and even the most rebellious members displayed complete obedience in his presence. Conan, who rarely fought and appeared gentle, was also highly respected due to being Pain's partner, essentially making her the second in command of Akatsuki. Now, she had unilaterally decided to bring Hidan into the group, and Pain agreed. This only solidified the perception that Pain and Conan's relationship was closer than an ordinary partnership. Could it be an intimate relationship? Some Akatsuki members speculated but weren't sure. However, they all understood that offending Conan was equivalent to offending Pain. Currently, everyone in Akatsuki acknowledged Pain's power. Even Itachi, after a period of observation, concluded that this man possessed unfathomable strength. Along with the masked man claiming to be Madara and the formidable Kojiro, who had withstood Tsukuyomi, it was clear that the world was full of hidden powers. With an impassive expression, Pain handed a ring marked with a kanji for 3 to Hidan. From now on, your partner is Kakazu? You two should be acquainted by now, given how you met. Hidan was initially surprised, then immediately dissatisfied, pointing at Kakazu. Why am I partnered with this guy instead of the short one over there? Hidan was referring to Itachi. He was still fixated on sacrificing the one who worshipped Cthulhu, and partnering with Itachi was his way of trying to extract information. I'll arrange another partner for Itachi later. You'll be with Kakazu? Follow my orders. At the second sentence, Pain's unique purple, concentric circle eyes glared at him. Even someone as dense as Hidan could feel the faint killing intent, which was no joke. He swallowed nervously and stayed silent. Alright, all the two-man teams except for Itachi's are set. Go and complete your missions. Itachi, your partner will take a bit more time. Under the clear sky, two figures dressed in black cloaks with red clouds walked along a mountain path. Never thought you'd end up as my partner, Kakazu muttered. He was one of the few in Akatsuki who had fought Pain head-on and had a direct understanding of his strength. So when Pain assigned Hidan as his partner earlier, he didn't dare protest. But now that they were away from Pain, he naturally started to complain. Hidan was equally disgruntled. I could say the same. I'm not too fond of you either. Don't get on my nerves, or I'll kill you. Try killing me, then. Maybe I'll sacrifice you to the Lord first. I don't need your heart. The two bickered as they headed toward the forest, but their arguments didn't delay their progress. By noon, a cluster of gray buildings stood by the roadside, catching Hidan's attention. Wow, didn't expect to see buildings like these in the middle of the mountains. Pretty rare. While Hidan marveled from the roadside, Kakazu had already walked inside. Why are you going in there? Kakazu ignored him, leaving Hidan no choice but to follow. Inside the gray building, the interior resembled an unfinished structure with nothing but cement walls. Kakazu finally explained to Hidan, my main job in Akatsuki is to gather funds, because I'm very good at making money. This place is a bounty station. You can accept bounty missions here. Complete the task, and you learn high rewards. The minimum bounty here is at least 1 million ryo. Quite a lot, isn't it? He wanted to intimidate Hidan, who was still a novice, by mentioning a sum that would seem enormous to him. However, Hidan wasn't impressed and shook his head, saying, money is easy to get when you have religion and followers. You can have as much as you want. Oh? This statement piqued Kakazu's interest in the topic of making money. Think about it. If each follower donates 10,000 ryo, it's 1 million ryo with 100 followers. Hidan spoke lightly, but Kakazu doused him with cold reality. You seem to have fewer than 30 followers. They'll increase in the future. Hidan quickly retorted. Kakazu didn't respond and continued to search the wall for a hidden mechanism. By that logic, the one who worships the other dark god, with tens of thousands of followers, must be incredibly wealthy. Click. A hidden panel on the wall moved, revealing a hidden space. Why did the wall move? Hidan, like a country bumpkin, pointed at the moving wall. Kakazu ignored him and walked in, forcing Hidan to follow. Behind the wall was a vast, empty space. Aside from the numerous corpse lockers lining the walls, there was only one receptionist. Why is it so cold in here? And what's that smell? Don't you smell it? Hey. Kakazu still ignored Hidan's noise and went straight to the receptionist. Give me the latest bounty list. Yes, Kakazu. Kakazu took the bounty list and flipped through it, looking for suitable targets. Since the bounty station wasn't exclusive to him, the bounty list was constantly updated. Before choosing a target, it was always wise to confirm whether the mission was still available and if the reward amount had changed to avoid wasted effort. After flipping through most of the list, Kakazu came across an unusual bounty. Most of the bounties at the station were for ninja corpses or high-ranking officials, but this one was different. The target in the bounty image resembled a crustacean with wing-like membranes and multiple jointed limbs. Where the head should be was an ovoid covered in short, stubby tentacles. Below the image was the bounty's description. Bounty target, Migo. Reward, 60 million ryo. 60 million. Even Kakazu, who handled money frequently and had grown somewhat numb to large sums, couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. This was an enormous bounty. To put it in perspective, a bounty of 30 million was enough to secure the body of an elite Jonin. So, 60 million could get at least 2 elite Jonin. Excluding targets like the Kage of the 5 great shinobi villages or the daimyo of the 5 great nations, targets that were nearly impossible to assassinate or too dangerous to attempt, there was hardly ever an individual with a bounty as high as 60 million. Considering the bounty amount, feasibility of assassination, and risk involved, This Migo seemed to be the most lucrative target in the entire bounty book. However, from its picture, it was not a human. It appeared to be some sort of creature he had never seen before. But how would one even begin to hunt something like that? Just then, the receptionist at the bounty office noticed that Kakazu had paused on the page with Migo and quickly approached him. The bounty for Migo was actually updated yesterday. The bounty is no longer 60 million. It's now 80 million. What? Kakazu's eyes widened as he looked at the image in the bounty book, shocked by the value of the creature. An 80 million bounty was enough to make his heart race. Without a doubt, this Migo offered the best value for effort in the entire book. It was an ideal target, especially since killing a strange creature like this wouldn't bring revenge or trouble to Akatsuki. It was practically the perfect investment. The only issue was that he had no information on this creature, where it could be found, or what it even was. Did the person offering the bounty leave any details about where this thing might be found? He asked. No. The bounty poster only left this picture. Kakazu nodded. He now understood why the person who posted the bounty was willing to offer 80 million for it. Maybe the creature itself wasn't hard to capture, the hardest part was figuring out where to find it. He considered himself one of the longest living people in the ninja world, still active and sharp at over 80 years old. He had seen all sorts of strange things over the years. But even with all his experience, he had never encountered a creature like this. That explained why no one had been able to claim the 60 million bounty so far, leading the poster to raise the reward by another 20 million. However, this also proved that the bounty poster was confident in the creature's existence and desperately wanted it. Though he wanted the enormous payout, the lack of leads on where to start looking made it seem inefficient to pursue. After some thought, he decided to continue browsing the bounty book, searching for a more feasible target. What are you wasting so much time for? Hidan, who had been waiting impatiently, walked over and snatched the bounty book from Kakazu's hands. You! Kakazu was about to shout, but Hidan cut him off with an even louder voice. How did this thing end up in here? Damn Migo. Holding the bounty book, his tone revealed a hint of hatred toward Migo. More importantly, it seemed like he knew what a Migo was. This piqued Kakazu's interest. He immediately let go of the idea of punishing Hidan for taking the book and asked, Do you recognize the creature in the bounty book? Of course, Hidan nodded. This is one of the creatures the Lord absolutely despises. If we ever come across them, we are obligated to eradicate them. One of them? Kakazu asked. Yeah, the Lord's most hated creatures are the Cthulhu and the Deep Ones. They serve Cthulhu. The Migo is also a species he despises. Anything that he hates, I hate too. And anything I hate, I'll stop. Kakazu cut off his ramblings. The only thing he cared about right now was the 80 million bounty for the Migo, not who Hidan liked or hated. Does your lord know where the Migo can be found? Kakazu asked impatiently. I need to know where to find this Migo. This is an 80 million bounty we're talking about. I don't know where the Migo is either. I'll have to ask the lord first, Hidan said. With that, Hidan pulled out a yellow medallion from his collar and whispered to it softly, as though communing with something on the other end. Kakazu squinted suspiciously at him, his gaze focusing on the medallion. When Hidan had first wanted to join Akatsuki, he also insisted on consulting his lord by talking to his necklace. Is a god answering him? No way. This guy must be delusional. Despite completely dismissing Hidan's communication with his lord, Kakazu decided to wait, given the promise of 80 million. Finally, Hidan put away the yellow medallion. So? Kakazu asked eagerly. Hidan remained silent. Well? Hurry up and tell me. Kakazu pressed. I know where the Migo is. Hidan exclaimed with a sudden burst of enthusiasm. Kakazu was skeptical. Are you messing with me? Believe what you want, but I'm going to hunt Migo now. It's the mission he entrusted to me. With that, he grabbed his bloody three-bladed scythe and walked out. Seeing this, Kakazu, who never let money slip away, hurried to follow. As they left, he made sure to call back, tell the bounty poster to prepare that 80 million. Once outside, the dynamic between the two had completely shifted. Now, Hidan was leading the way, and Kakazu followed behind. For once, Hidan was in control of the duo's actions. Kakazu, drawn by the lure of 80 million, fell silent and humbly trailed behind. They walked from day until nightfall, eventually reaching a mountain. At the barren peak, Hidan knelt on a massive boulder like a devout follower, gripping the yellow medallion in his hands and muttering strange words under his breath. In the open, starry sky, the odd incantations drifted into the air as the only sound. Ia. Ia. Haster. Gthak, Volgm, Vugbligan, Volgm. Ia. Ia. Haster. Watching from behind, Kakazu felt he was being tricked. He had followed Hidan all day only for the cultist to climb up here and perform this bizarre ritual. The more Kakazu thought about it, the angrier he got. His fists, which had lowered to his sides, gradually turned black as he activated his iron skin technique to harden them. But just as his killing intent began to rise, Hidan suddenly stopped chanting, stood up, and said, "It's finally here. The servant of the king in yellow." The Byakuya. Chapter 165, The Undead Duo, The New World. Hidan and Kakazu stood on a rock, gazing into the darkness, wondering when something unusual might emerge from the river. Suddenly, Hidan turned his head in a particular direction. "It's here." Kakazu quickly followed his gaze and saw a bizarre giant bird rapidly flying toward them in the clear night sky. The bird's wings flapped rhythmically, but healthy eyes could not fully grasp their form, and a sound mind could not retain the image of this creature. In the moonlight, Kakazu noticed that this bird had characteristics of a crow, mole, vulture, and vampire bat, or even a decaying human corpse, yet none of these could adequately describe it. Its membranous wings, large enough to let faint moonlight pass through, flapped with each stroke, enlarging in Kakazu's vision. How ugly. What is that thing? He usually kept his emotions in check and appeared very composed, but ever since meeting Hidan, he found himself repeatedly losing control in fleeting moments. First, it was Hidan's strange black tendrils from his ninjutsu, and now this bizarre giant bird appearing out of nowhere in the night sky. The cultist had surprised Kakazu too many times with things he'd never seen or even heard of. That isn't just anything. That is a Byakuya. The Lord granted it to me as my mount. Isn't she beautiful? Under the moonlight, Hidan's eyes gleamed with admiration, clearly infatuated with the Byakuya. But to Kakazu, it was clear, this man was out of his mind. A normal person wouldn't even want to look at such a creature twice. The Byakuya quickly flew overhead, flapping its wings a few more times before landing steadily on the ground. Up close, he confirmed just how complex and imaginative this creature was. It had a vulture's giant beak, with parts of its body exposing grayish-white bone, black crow feathers on its back, webbed feet, bat-like membranous wings, a mole's pelt on its chest, and insect-like segmented limbs reminiscent of an ant. Fortunately, Kakazu had mentally prepared himself for the hybrid monstrosity that the Byakuya was called, so he was less shocked than before. However, upon further thought, he realized that this Byakuya resembled the target of their current bounty mission, the Migo. If the creature was worth 80 million ryo, how much could the Byakuya be worth? Could this thing sell for a lot of money? Kakazu carelessly voiced his thoughts aloud but was immediately met with strong opposition from Hidan. This was a gift from the Lord. Don't even think about it. Hidan stepped in front of the Byakuya. The creature tilted its head and spat at Kakazu with disdain. "Ha, good job, Fu." Pleased with Hidan's praise, the Byakuya, now affectionately called Fu, joyfully flapped its wings twice. It seemed the creature was smarter than Kakazu had initially thought. TCH. Kakazu temporarily shelved his idea of selling Hidan's pet and asked, "What does this thing have to do with our mission?" "Of course, we're riding her to the mission location, where we'll find the Migo." Kakazu nodded. It seemed Hidan was reliable sometimes. Riding this bird was certainly faster than walking. "Let's get moving, then." With that, he placed a hand on Byakuya's back. But as soon as his fingertips touched the black feathers, he felt a bone-chilling cold radiate from them. SSSS. Seeing Kakazu recoil as if electrocuted, Hidan laughed heartily. "Ha, Fu isn't just any mount. She is a void steed. Of course, she's freezing cold when she first lands. Why didn't you say so earlier? You didn't ask, and you were so eager to get on." After waiting a while, the Byakuya's body returned to a normal temperature. Hidan climbed onto her back first, followed by Kakazu. The bird's back was wide enough for one person to sit comfortably, and just barely wide enough for two. Once they were both seated, Hidan patted Fu's long, mole-fur-covered neck. With that, the creature slowly flapped its wings, rising into the sky. The towering mountains below quickly shrank into needle-like cones, and the entire world seemed to be beneath their feet. The moon above appeared larger and brighter than Kakazu had ever seen in his years of life. So this is what flying feels like? In the shinobi world, not many people could achieve true flight with their own abilities. One of the known person capable of it was the third Sushi Kage. Compared to his flight, other so-called flying shinobi, including the Sorin ninjas from long ago, could only glide at low altitudes. Flying, therefore, was considered a rare and valuable ability among shinobi. Though this flight was aided by the Byakuya and not achieved by the ninjas themselves, it was still impressive, like Deodara's clay birds, but with true height. Flight had strategic significance because it allowed one to rise out of the range of most weapons and ninjutsu, while also enabling various aerial strikes. The Byakuya had both of these capabilities. And Hidan had mentioned void travel, though Kakazu didn't know what that meant. It sounded impressive. At the Byakuya's incredible speed, They soon left the land behind, flying over an endless ocean. Looking back at the shrinking land, Kakazu, holding a map of the shinobi world, asked, "Why are we flying there?" Hidan, uncharacteristically patient, explained, "To hunt the Migo, we have to go there. The Lord said our world doesn't have the Migo. They're in another world. We have to find the gate to the new world." New world? Kakazu was doubtful, as he'd never heard of such a thing in all his years. But the possibility wasn't entirely out of the question. No one in the shinobi world really cared about what lay in the sea. Having lived so long, the idea of exploring beyond the sea felt like an exciting prospect. As the dawnlight scattered over the ocean, the giant bird flew through the sky. After hours of flight, Hidan suddenly gripped his scythe tighter. "Hold on tight. We're going down." "What?" Before Kakazu could finish, the Bayaki plunged into the dark waters. The sudden dive caught him off guard, his grip instinctively tightening on the creature. Deep beneath the waves, a massive stone gate emerged from the gloom, its surface carved with unfamiliar symbols. The Bayaki shot through the luminescent portal. For a moment, everything went black. Then they burst upward, breaking through the surface of different waters under different skies. This is the new world. The sun slowly rose from the horizon, casting its light over the vast and boundless land below. From the incredibly high altitude at which the Bayaki was flying, the mountains and plains of this land were fully visible, stretching out like a giant canvas. The diverse landscapes blended together like patches of color merging at the edges, creating a grand, breathtaking scene. Neither Kakazu nor Hidan had ever witnessed such a majestic sight in their lives. "Whoa!" Hidan, sitting in front, couldn't help but shout in excitement as he took in the view. Though Kakazu, sitting behind him, wasn't as exaggerated in his reaction, he too was deeply surprised. While the two were marveling at the new world, the Bayaki approached the airspace near the coastline. "Hey, Fu, fly a bit lower," Hidan called. The Bayaki began a rapid descent. It wasn't particularly suited for low-altitude flying, as the vacuum of outer space was its preferred environment. During long-distance flights, it typically maintained an altitude of over 6 kilometers, where the thin air allowed it to fly at speeds of 70 kilometers per hour. At that height, the temperature was well below freezing. Luckily, both Kakazu and Hidan were ninjas, and their bodies could withstand the cold far better than ordinary people. The freezing air of the previous night hadn't affected them too much. However, for higher altitude or longer distance flights, they would need a different magical tool to survive. As the Bayaki descended, the two of them finally felt the warmth that they had missed, their slightly stiff bodies relaxing in the more comfortable temperature. Now that they were flying lower, they could clearly see the scenery below. Along the coastline, gray coastal buildings and piers made primarily of brown wood stretched out, showing signs of human civilization. It was undeniable, this land wasn't a wild, untamed place, it was inhabited by people. With the Bayaki flying lower, its speed had decreased significantly, which allowed many people on the ground to spot it. "Look! What is that?" "Where?" "Over there. That big bird. I see it." "What kind of bird is that?" "It looks so ugly. It looks like there are two people sitting on its back." Kakazu, flying overhead, noticed more and more people on the ground looking up at them. He turned to Hidan and said, "Hey, we're flying too low. People are spotting us. Let them see. We're not wanted criminals here," Hidan said smugly, looking down at the humans below, who seemed like ants. He was thoroughly enjoying being admired from above. After Hidan's remark, Kakazu thought for a moment and realized he was right. In the shinobi world, he might be a wanted rogue ninja from Taki, but here, he was a free man. Or perhaps even more than that, a mysterious outsider in this world. No one knew their background, nor did anyone know their abilities. Even if he unleashed a devastating jutsu here, no one would be able to trace it back to him. Once their mission was over, they would just fly away. With this realization, Kakazu no longer felt restricted. After maintaining low-altitude flight for a while, the Bayaki finally began its descent, landing gently on the ground. Finally landed. "Feels good." Hidan jumped down, stretched a bit, then turned to the Bayaki. "You can go back now. Just remember to come pick us up later." With a few flaps of its wings, it took off into the sky again. "Hey, where's the Migo?" "The Lord told me it's in that town over there," Hidan replied, pointing toward a town between the mountains and water. The two walked toward the town, which was bustling with people. The streets were crowded, and vendors lined the sides, selling all sorts of goods. The people here dressed simply, in clothes similar to those worn in remote villages of the 5 great nations. On either side of the town streets stood buildings with a peculiar style, mostly constructed of wood, earth, and stone. The structures were square inches design, reminiscent of medieval architecture, with stone statues and small fountains as decorative elements. What shocked Kakazu and Hidan the most was that the language spoken by the townspeople was completely understandable to them. Sophia, go get some wine from the tavern for me. I'm going to drink to my heart's content today. Here are the farming tools my father made for your family. I've brought them over. Potatoes. Potatoes. 2 copper coins each. The voices of the townspeople reached Kakazu and Hidan's ears clearly and without mistake, leaving both of them momentarily dumbfounded. Why was it that the people here spoke the same language as those in the shinobi world? Could it be that the language of the shinobi world was actually a universal language? Hey, are you sure about this place? Why are the people here speaking our language? Kakazu asked. He just shrugged and said, what does it matter? It makes things easier for us. They walked a bit farther, and Kakazu's suspicion grew. This town is so lively. How could there be a Migo here? Finally, Hidan couldn't hold back anymore. He shouted in the middle of the street, how should I know? The shout drew immediate attention from the surrounding townspeople. Their red-clouded, black cloaks were already eye-catching, and now, with Hidan yelling in the street, people began to slowly gather around them. Hey, your faces are unfamiliar. Your clothes are strange. Are you part of an assassination group? Did the enemies of the Utopia send you to assassinate Hyde-sama? Knights. There are suspicious individuals here. Before Kakazu and Hidan had a chance to explain, the crowd closed in around them. In the distance, 2 knights in silver armor on horseback heard the commotion and started approaching. Hey, we've been discovered, Kakazu said. What now? Do we run or fight? Hidan's lips curled into a cruel, wicked smile as his hand slowly reached for the scythe hidden under his cloak. Although offering these people as sacrifices would be ideal, he had no qualms about slaughtering them if that was what it took. Since we've been discovered, there's no other choice. Chapter 166, The Undead Duo, hide in the next second, Kakazu turned and pushed through the crowd, running away. Hey! Hey! Why are you running? TCH. Hidan had no choice but to turn around and follow Kakazu in their escape. Hi-ah! There's an assassin in the city. Catch the assassin. Chase those 2 over there. More and more armored knights, riding horses, gathered in the town, all pursuing Kakazu and Hidan, who were ahead of them. Although the knights were on horseback, their speed couldn't match that of the ninjas. The town's complex terrain also made it harder for the knights to keep up, and the distance between them and the 2 ninjas grew larger. Kakazu led Hidan into a narrow alley, completely losing the knights. Weren't we going to fight? Why did you turn and run? If Migo really is in this town, we can't cause too much of a commotion. It's better to act low-key. Hearing Kakazu's explanation, Hidan crossed his arms and shook his head. Why are you so timid? What do you know? This is called being cautious. That's just being a coward. Cautious. Coward. Cautious. While the 2 were arguing, the chaos in the streets caused by these outsiders had not subsided. More and more knights gathered. Find those 2 suspicious individuals quickly. They shouldn't have gone far. Yes. I will report this to Hyde-sama's personal guard. At the command of the leading knight, the armored soldiers dispersed into the town's streets, asking the residents if they had seen 2 men dressed in strange clothing. Kakazu and Hidan, perched on a rooftop, observed everything clearly. Kakazu slowly pulled his head back from the roof's edge and said, it seems these are just civilians who don't know any ninjutsu, completely non-threatening. To him, these so-called knights were equivalent to the common soldiers of the 5 great nations' daimyos, though their armor and weapons seemed a bit more refined. But no matter how strong these knights were, they were no match for ninjas. The earlier chase was proof, Kakazu and Hidan had easily shaken off the pursuing knights. This was good news because, with their current abilities, they were operating on a level far above this world's inhabitants. In fact, no one in this world could stop them from doing whatever they wanted. However, Kakazu was intrigued by the constant mention of someone named Hyde. Who was this person? Could he be connected to the Migo? It was clear that civilians wouldn't be hiding a strange creature like the Migo. If Migos were truly in this town, only someone with a special status might be involved. He shared his thoughts with Hidan, and when the Migo was mentioned, even Hidan became serious and thoughtful. But as he turned his head while on the roof, his gaze suddenly locked onto something shocking in the distance. Ah! What is that? Hidan's face showed an expression of disbelief, so Kakazu followed his line of sight and saw the same thing. That's... A colossal fortress was slowly moving from the outskirts of the town toward the city. The fortress resembled a massive clock tower with no visible windows, only gray stones and bronze-colored metal. It stood like an insurmountable barrier on the town's outskirts, towering as high as the nearby mountains. Inside the massive hall of the fortress, a man stood with his hands behind his back at the top of a staircase, staring out at the landscape, lost in thought. The man was slightly plump, draped in a blue cloak, and had distinctive orange hair with a single monocle, giving him an air of scholarly wisdom. At that moment, a person entered the hall. It was a young knight in silver armor with sandy blonde hair and a youthful face, looking no older than 12 or 13. The young knight knelt on one knee behind the man and said, "Hyde-sama, the knights have discovered suspicious individuals in the nearby town. They might be assassins sent by an opposing force. Should we take action?" The man addressed as Hyde was silent for a long time before speaking. "Richard, do you remember what I told you? This world is plagued by war. Countless people have lost their lives and the ones they love to the flames of conflict. So, I want to protect those who cannot protect themselves. I long to create a world free from war. That is my dream, and the guiding principle of our nation. If I retreat in the face of such a minor challenge, our nation will never come to fruition. No matter how large we build our nation, we will always lack one piece of land. And that piece is the town before us." As he spoke, Hyde turned to face the young knight, Richard, tears welling up in his mismatched blue-green eyes. "So, no matter what obstacles lie ahead in the town, I will not back down. The people suffering there also need me to save them. One or two assassins cannot stop my resolve to create the ideal nation. To this day, my dream has been passed on to many like-minded individuals. Even if I fall, thousands will rise to continue my vision. And Richard, you will protect me. Won't you?" Hyde's speech deeply moved Richard, bringing tears to the young knight's eyes. He immediately gave Hyde a knight's oath of loyalty. "I will follow you through fire and water." Seeing Richard's dedication, Hyde nodded in satisfaction, a sly gleam flashing in his green eye beneath the monocle. "Then pass the order, the fortress will not retreat. Continue advancing." "Yes." After Richard left, the hall fell quiet again. Hyde slowly raised his hand. He wore a black, fingerless glove adorned with a sparkling green gem on the back. The stone of Grill. "Let's see how well these modified gloves work." Hyde aimed the glove at a spider and its web in the corner of the room. With a slight flick of his middle finger, both the spider and the web were obliterated. Yet, surprisingly, no trace was left on the wall behind it. It was as if the spider had simply vanished. Wow! The precision and control over minimal power are far better than the previous glove. Now let's test its power. That spot over there should do. Hyde aimed the glove toward a section of the forest outside the fortress. With a slight flick of his middle finger, a green beam shot out from the glove. Boom! A large section of the forest was instantly flattened by the explosion, the smoke from which was visible even from the fortress. Ha 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 ha! Their weapon is truly amazing. Hyde-sama is here. He is here. Hurry to listen to Hyde-sama's speech. He has come to save us. The townsfolk spread the news excitedly, rushing toward the town center. Hyde, the founder of the Ideal State organization, had garnered immense popularity among the common people in recent years. The organization he established, the Ideal State, is dedicated to protecting the weak from the ravages of war and creating a world of complete peace without conflict. Wherever his presence reached, that place effectively became part of the Ideal State and fell under its protection. Any faction attempting to wage war within the Ideal State's territory would face its severe sanctions. This vision resonated with more and more people, rapidly expanding Hyde's influence. His domain had even surpassed those of the ruling lords combined. The power of the Ideal State was formidable, boasting not only a sizable traditional knight force but also advanced technology as its greatest weapon. Hyde controlled a massive fortress stronghold and a formidable vanguard of knights wielding mysterious powers. The mountain-like fortress was mobile, capable of traversing most terrains with ease. Beneath it lay a colossal crushing mechanism, capable of flattening the fortifications that the feudal lords prided themselves on. The fortress also housed elite knights who were fearless and incredibly strong, rendering Hyde invincible in his wars against the feudal lords. Hyde was once a minor feudal lord with a passion for exploring ancient civilizations. Some speculated that he had uncovered an ancient ruin, acquiring technology far beyond the era. But regardless of the truth, one fact was indisputable: Hyde was destined to rule the world, and the Ideal State's reach would inevitably expand further. For the common people, however, who ruled the world mattered little, they simply longed for peace. And Hyde's actions proved he was the one who could bring peace to the weak, earning him a hero's welcome from the townsfolk. In the center of the town once stood a church, but years of war had reduced it to a single crumbling wall, ready to collapse at any moment. Hyde climbed this precarious wall under the watchful eyes of the crowd. His movements were clumsy, his unathletic frame struggling to ascend. The people watched anxiously, their hearts racing every time he wobbled. Finally, he reached the top of the wall, eliciting a wave of cheers from the crowd. Hyde-sama! Hyde-sama! Dusting off his sleeves, Hyde smiled warmly at the people below. After basking in the applause and cheers, he began his speech. "I believe many of you have already heard of the Ideal State," he began. The ideal state is an organization that shelters the weak and aims to build a utopia. Although we've made significant progress, the feudal lords who wage war are always ready to strike back. Thus, I call upon you to join us, join the ideal state. Together, we can defend our homeland and create a utopia. While Hyde passionately addressed the crowd in the town, Pikachu and Hidan stood at the foot of the enormous fortress just outside. Whoa, it's massive. Standing before the fortress, Hidan couldn't even see its top. Its sheer size was beyond anything even in the shinobi world. But such size came with disadvantages, such as becoming an easy target for concentrated ninjutsu attacks. The duo's purpose for being there was clear, to find the Migo. After failing to locate it in the town, the fortress was their last lead. The fortress loomed like a towering pagoda, its lowest entrance guarded by knights in brown-red armor, patrolling diligently. Shall we begin? Let's do this. They leapt out of hiding, landing directly in front of the patrolling knights. The knights quickly encircled them, ready for battle. Wasting no time, Hidan swung his three-bladed scythe at one knight's head, while Pikachu used iron skin to harden his fist and punched another in the chest. The knights, caught off guard, didn't react. One lost his head to Hidan's scythe, and the other had his chest punched clean through by Pikachu. Too easy. Hidan smugly slung his scythe back over his shoulder. But his smirk froze within seconds. The decapitated knight and the one with the destroyed chest didn't fall. Instead, after a brief pause, they resumed their assault, swinging their warhammers at them. The two ninjas leapt back. Examining the decapitated knight's exposed neck, they realized the brown-red armor contained no human body. Hey, these knights aren't like the townsfolk earlier, Hidan muttered. The more analytical Kakazu quickly assessed the situation. From their uniform warhammers and the glowing red eyes beneath their helmets, he deduced, these aren't humans, they're puppet-like constructs. Didn't you say people here don't use ninjutsu? Hidan complained. Who said puppets require ninjutsu? These aren't ninja puppets, just similar constructs controlled by some force unique to this world. Recalling Sasori's prowess in puppet techniques, Pikachu made the comparison. Forget it. You deal with these hollow puppets. I'm heading inside to find the Migo. Hidan vaulted over a knight's head and dashed into the fortress. The knight tried to pursue but was struck down by Kakazu's tendrils, slamming it into a nearby rock. Annoying, but I'm not letting my bounty slip away, he muttered. As his back bulged and four black masked entities emerged, the knight's lifeless gaze remained fixed. Inside the fortress, Hidan ran through metallic corridors, cutting down any pursuing puppet knights. While the scythe's damage temporarily immobilized the puppets, his speed kept him well ahead. His goal was not the Hollow Knights but the Migo, who could not be sacrificed. Guided by a strange pulse from the sign on his chest, he quickened his pace. Soon, the yellow sign led him to a hemispherical chamber, within which was a smaller metallic dome. The sign pulsed intensely, directing Hidan to the dome. He sprinted across a metallic walkway and entered, where he finally found the creature he sought. Migo. Chapter 167, The Undead Duo. The energy source in the hemispherical room stood a colossal three-dimensional structure resembling a luxuriant branching tree. On each branch, there was a sphere. Inside each sphere floated a human brain, suspended in green nutrient fluid. Next to this tree-like apparatus, Migo was performing a meticulous surgery. Its numerous claw-like limbs operated surgical tools with precision, carefully slicing open the skull of a child lying on the operating table. With a few deft cuts, it severed the nerves and extracted the brain. At that moment, Hidan burst into the room. His sudden appearance immediately caught the Migo's attention. For a brief moment, their gazes locked. Though he had received orders from the King in Yellow to hunt down the Migo and had some understanding of these creatures, seeing one in person left him in awe. Its entire body was pink and resembled a crustacean, with numerous crab-like clawed limbs and a pair of massive membranous wings on its back. Most striking was its elliptical head, which lacked facial features but was instead adorned with writhing tendrils. Looks like there's a lot of brain matter here. A fanatical grin spread across his face as he slammed his right foot onto the ground and charged at the Migo, wielding his blood-stained scythe. The Migo, sensing the imminent danger, quickly returned the human brain it had just extracted back into the open skull. By then, Hidan was already in front of it, leaping and swinging his scythe at its head. However, to his surprise, the razor-sharp scythe failed to penetrate the Migo's head. Instead, it was blocked by a web of green viscous filaments covering its surface. He recalled some information about the Migo stored in his mind, including details about this green mucus web, a biological armor that could not be easily breached. After two more fruitless strikes, Hidan abandoned his attacks. If I can't kill you with my blade, then I'll sacrifice you. Jumping back to his original position, he slammed his scythe into the metallic ground and pulled out a yellow symbol with one hand. Great King in Yellow, your devotee calls for your descent. As his voice echoed, a black shadowy tentacle slowly rose above his head. The black tentacle undulated, its surface rippling like dense folds of skin. Its tip, armed with a blade and suction cups, radiated an aura of death and desecration. Yet, despite the emergence of this dangerous black tentacle, the Migo did not flee. Instead, it tilted its elliptical head toward the tentacle and began walking toward it, moving deliberately with its lowest pair of clawed limbs. The closer the Migo approached the black tentacle, the more violently the tendrils on its elliptical head trembled. Suddenly, the Migo stopped, bowing before the massive black tentacle in a posture resembling worship. In a buzzing voice, it began to speak in human language, Great Haster. The Unspeakable One. The Lord of Interstellar Spaces. Witnessing this, Dan finally understood, the Migo was also a follower of the same eldritch god he worshipped. Whoa. You're also a follower of the Great Haster? How lucky. So am I. Then you won't mind being sacrificed to our god, will you? It's the highest honor, after all. Sacrifice, or follower. Sacrifice. The black tentacle swiftly descended, with the suction cup at its tip enveloping the Migo's head. The circular blade surrounding the suction cup began slicing through the biological armor's green mucus threads. In mere seconds, the tentacle's powerful cutting force broke through the armor. Interestingly, the defense offered by Kakazu's Earth Sphere technique had proven even more resilient than the Migo's biological armor. From the soft elliptical head, green cerebrospinal fluid was slowly extracted. As the brain fluid was continuously drawn out, the Migo's body convulsed violently. But the black tentacle wasn't finished. Dozens of smaller tentacles sprouted from it, extending toward the massive spheres in the apparatus that housed human brains. These brains, extracted by the Migo during its surgeries, remained alive and conscious. Now, they too were treated as sacrifices by the black tentacle. The smaller tentacles easily pierced the glass and attached their suction cups directly to the brain's surfaces. The cerebral cortexes visibly shriveled at an alarming rate. With dozens of tentacles now harvesting from the brains, the entire room became a treasure trove of dread value. Ha 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 ha. Revel in this, oh great god. All of this is for you. In the central control room at the summit of the fortress stronghold, one of Hyde's 3 female knights lounged in the chair at the console, her legs crossed casually. Suddenly, an alarm blared from the console. Rachel quickly lowered her legs and leaned forward to investigate, immediately identifying the issue. Impossible. There's a problem in the power room? Since Hyde struck a deal with the mysterious beings called Migo, the power room had been under their management. The fortress derived its energy from children placed inside spheres, which somehow harnessed their unique life force. Moreover, the near-guard puppet knights of the fortress were controlled using the children's brainwaves. However, this power source had a flaw: only children could provide this energy. As the children grew older inside the spheres, they eventually lost their utility as energy sources. Additionally, prolonged confinement rendered their brains and bodies unusable outside the spheres, leading to rapid death and a complete loss of value. The Migo had introduced a solution, transferring the children's brains into external cultivation chambers. This process not only ensured a continuous power supply and control over puppet soldiers but also prevented the children's bodies from maturing and losing their usefulness. The Migo had also offered numerous unprecedented technological advances. While Rachel was unaware of the full details of the deal between Hyde and these creatures, Hyde had once assured her that their interests aligned. But now, with the power room in jeopardy, Rachel couldn't help but suspect otherwise. I'd better notify Hyde-sama immediately. Once the utopia is established, this will become our true homeland, a place where we can roam freely. High above, Hyde was delivering a rousing speech to the gathered masses. Richard's communicator suddenly emitted a burst of static noise. Richard raised his wrist and brought the device to his ear. Quick, inform Hyde-sama. Something's gone wrong in the power room. Rachel, what's happened? I'm not sure, maybe those creatures have rebelled. Richard, already aware of the creatures Rachel was referring to, lowered the communicator and turned his gaze toward Hyde, who continued his speech. Just as Richard prepared to leap up and warn Hyde, a massive explosion erupted in the distance. Hyde spun around to face the source of the blast. It came from his fortress, his stronghold. Fire style, searing migraine. Wind style, pressure damage. Pikazu strolled leisurely through the corridors of the fortress. Puppet knights wielding long-handled hammers repeatedly attacked him, but all were repelled by various ninjutsu fired from the 4 black figures behind him. The fireballs launched by searing migraine struck the puppet knight's armor, and the massive flames quickly engulfed it, consuming the interior of the armor. From within the flames, the puppet knights let out a low, pained groan. Pressure damage sent wind spheres that created miniature vortex storms upon striking the puppet knights. As the storms exploded, the armor shattered into fragments. Even though you're undying puppets, Once the integrity of your armor is severely damaged, you won't be able to move. Armor with no soul, yet when burned by fire, it still seems to feel pain. How bizarre. Through the battle, Pikachu had already identified the puppet knight's weakness. However, he was unaware that these puppet knights were actually controlled by the consciousness of children. Though the children didn't feel pain from the puppet knights' bodies, the biological instinct to fear fire was hard to suppress. As he rounded a corner in the corridor, he found another dozen puppet knights blocking his path. How annoying. Pikachu wasn't one to shy away from trouble, especially if it involved earning money. But defeating these puppet knights neither helped him train his ninjutsu nor brought him any satisfaction, let alone a reward. That was why he found it such a hassle. Just as Kakazu prepared to dispatch all these puppet knights in one go, they suddenly all collapsed to the ground, paralyzed. He stepped forward to investigate and discovered that, in an instant, these puppet knights seemed to have lost control, reverting into lifeless, reddish-brown armor. It must be that guy doing something again. Didn't expect that brat to actually be useful for once. With no puppet knights in his way, he quickly found his partner. In a hemispherical engine room, Hidan was sitting on the corpse-like shell of Migo, propping himself up with his blood-stained triple-bladed scythe. He looked as though he was resting. Seeing Kakazu enter, he lowered the scythe he had just raised. "This place is pretty big. Surprised you found me so quickly." Kakazu didn't respond, though it wasn't as if he had found the place purely by luck. In fact, the ring's pain distributed to every member of the Akatsuki contained a unique signal transmitter. Not only could this signal receiver pick up communication via pain's chakra, but by learning the proper hand seals, one ring could also locate the position of another. The rings used by the Akatsuki were actually paired rings capable of sensing each other's location. The locating ring was the male ring, while the counterpart was the female ring. This was also why Pain insisted on forming two-person teams. Furthermore, if a ring bearer died, the next member would use the same ring, provided it could be retrieved. Pain distributed rings to each member of the Akatsuki, entrusting the hand seals and a male ring to the member in each duo who was more loyal to the organization. This way, if the other member suddenly defected, the one holding the male ring could detect it in time. It was a very clever system, not only effective at preventing betrayal but also avoiding making new members feel overly monitored. At the same time, it granted loyal members a sense of elevated privilege. However, there was one exception: Orochimaru. The ring of Sasori failed to detect the Sanin's whereabouts. Ultimately, it was through a spy that he had planted near Orochimaru that they tracked him down. This was likely because, 4 years earlier, during Orochimaru's interaction with the other two members of the Sanin, Sasori had detected him. The Snake Sanin must have realized there was something on him, enabling Sasori to track his position. With his intellect and abilities, he quickly deduced that the problem lay with the ring and neutralized its tracking function. Instead of discarding the ring after leaving the Akatsuki, he kept it with him to study the signal transmitter embedded in it. Since he didn't return the Sky Ring, Pain gave Deidara the blue-green ring. Both rings, however, could still be detected by Sasori's sphere ring. Based on Kakazu's years of experience in Akatsuki, apart from the rings belonging to Pain, Konan, and Zetsu, the remaining male rings were Sasori's sphere, his own north, and Juzo's south. After Juzo's death, Pain refrained from assigning the south ring to Itachi, even limiting the Uchiha's activities. This indicated that Pain didn't trust Itachi at all, believing his loyalty was no greater than that of a newly recruited member. To Kakazu, this was quite an intriguing piece of gossip. Kakazu approached the corpse of Migo beneath Hidan and silently observed it for a moment. He had already seen Migo's image in a bounty manual, so the sight didn't shock him too much now that he was prepared. Regaining focus, he raised his head and asked Hidan, "How do we transport this thing?" "I've already called Fu. It'll be here soon, just wait a bit." "Okay." Unlike the carefree Hidan, Kakazu wasn't one to sit idly. Instead, he began examining the surrounding environment. Although he couldn't discern the purpose of the massive device in the center, Kakazu knew it was undoubtedly high-tech, far beyond anything found in the ninja world. He hadn't expected such advanced technology to exist in this world. If he could take it back, it might fetch a hefty price. As he mused over how much the enemy's high-tech equipment could be worth, Hidan casually rested inside the enemy's base. Suddenly, the sound of running footsteps came from the entrance. "You two sure seem relaxed in Hide-sama's fortress." They turned toward the door to see a red-eyed female knight with blonde hair and purple armor. "Who's this?" Hidan asked. "Obviously someone from this fortress," Kakazu replied, slowly turning toward the female knight. "But I didn't expect to find a living person here. I thought this place was full of hollow puppets." The female knight swept her arm dramatically, her cape billowing behind her with a heroic air. "Don't lump me in with those useless scraps. I'm Rachel, one of Hide-sama's 3 knights." Hidan, sitting atop Migo's corpse, hopped down and waved dismissively. "I'll leave this woman to you. I'll start hauling the Migo's corpse upstairs. But finish the fight quickly. If you're not done by the time Fu gets here, I'll leave you behind in this world." Kakazu glanced at Hidan's departing back and scoffed coldly. "Don't worry. It won't take long." Chapter 168, The Undead Duo, Power of Another World. Watching Hidan drag the Migo's corpse away through another exit in the engine room, Rachel did not immediately give chase. She knew that unless she dealt with the grim man in the black mask in front of her, she wouldn't be able to proceed. "What's your name?" Rachel asked. "Kakazu." "Humphrey, what an unpleasant name." At Rachel's taunt, Kakazu furrowed his brow slightly and said, "Is taunting all you've got? Hurry up and attack." The knight smiled faintly, clasped her hands together in front of her chest, then spread them apart. A bright purple arc of lightning appeared between her hands. Seeing the arc of lightning materialize out of nowhere, Kakazu was momentarily stunned. "Huh? Is this ninjutsu? No hand seals?" Before he could make sense of what he was seeing, Rachel had already launched the two arcs of lightning at him. Lightning strike. Kakazu's defensive techniques relied on earth style, which was especially weak against lightning. So, instead of trying to block the attack, he leapt onto a nearby power unit. The two lightning arcs missed, crashing into the ground. However, Rachel wasn't discouraged. She looked up at Kakazu, now perched on higher ground, and taunted, "Do you think being up there makes you untouchable? How naive." The arcs of lightning in Rachel's hands fired again, viciously attacking Kakazu. Wherever the lightning arcs struck, metal plates were instantly ripped apart. If those strikes landed on a person, the damage would be catastrophic. Kakazu's physical prowess, however, allowed him to dodge Rachel's attacks with relative ease. As he avoided the strikes, he calmly analyzed the situation, trying to understand this ability. At first, he had assumed that this world didn't have ninjutsu. But now it seemed that, while this world lacked traditional ninjutsu, it did possess abilities similar to it. Take this woman, for instance, she could emit lightning arcs without forming hand seals, even manipulating them like whips. "So, it seems your world's people have some special abilities as well," Kakazu remarked during a pause in Rachel's assault. His words startled Rachel, reminding her of what a scythe-wielding man had said earlier. He had said, "We'll leave you in this world." And now this man in front of her said, "Your world's people." The implication seemed clear, they were not from this world. "Where exactly are you from?" To uncover the truth, Rachel suddenly stopped her attack, retracting the lightning arcs, and asked Kakazu. "Me? I'm from another world." Kakazu's tone suddenly sharpened as he raised his hand and launched a tentacle punch directly at her chest. However, Rachel wasn't caught off guard by the conversation. She quickly raised her hands, forming a hemispherical electric barrier in front of her. Kakazu's tentacle punch struck the barrier, and the iron skin imbued in the tentacle was instantly neutralized by the lightning, turning it into an ordinary punch. Ugh! The powerful electric current traveled through the connecting threads into his body, causing him pain. Squinting one eye, he hastily severed the threads to disconnect his fist from the barrier, ending the electrical discharge. Seeing Kakazu's slightly disheveled state, Rachel taunted again, "Is that all you've got?" Adjusting himself, Kakazu looked up at Rachel. "You've managed to annoy me." As his words fell, his newly mended red and black cloak ripped apart again. Massive black threads burst from his back, forcing out 4 masks that formed into 4 black shapes behind him. He hadn't planned to use his Earth Grudge Fear mode against this woman. But her lightning abilities perfectly countered his Earth attribute, leaving him with no choice. When Rachel saw the 4 black forms emerging from Kakazu's back, she realized he was finally taking the fight seriously. In that case, Rachel's body began to transform. Her previously slender figure swelled rapidly, and within seconds, she had turned into a hulking ape with a blue face. Prepare to die. Rachel took heavy steps forward, her thick, hammer-like arms ready to strike Kakazu the moment she got close. Wind style, pressure damage. Kakazu quickly formed hand seals and unleashed a fully powered attack. A massive wind sphere shot out of the black form representing the wind attribute. Rachel quickly halted her advance, bracing herself with both hands to summon a blue electric barrier in front of her. Useless. Your attacks can't break through my electric barrier. But before she could finish speaking, she saw with her own eyes a small hole forming in her blue shield. The hole spread rapidly, like a dam bursting, and the massive wind sphere surged through the opening. In an instant, the massive wind sphere broke completely through the electric barrier and struck Rachel's body. Her ape form was sent spinning violently through the air, crashing into the metal walls of the engine room. By the time Kakazu approached her, Rachel's ape transformation had already dissolved. Her knight armor was shattered, revealing the layers beneath. A foolish woman who doesn't even know that wind counters lightning. Pikachu looked at the now unconscious Rachel. After a moment of thought, he tore off the top half of his red cloud-patterned black cloak and draped it over Rachel's body. Then he hoisted her over his shoulder and headed toward the fortress's upper level. What's taking so long? At the top of the fortress, the Byakuya was already waiting. However, Pikachu hadn't taken off immediately as planned and had been delayed. This woman was harder to deal with than expected. It took some time. Hidan glanced at the unconscious female knight slung over Kakazu's shoulder and shouted, "Why'd you bring her?" "We're heading back. This woman possesses a unique ability. If we bring her back, she might fetch a good price." Just as Kakazu and Hidan were preparing to leave, more people arrived in pursuit, led by Hyde. Rachel. The two female knights with him immediately cried out upon seeing their captured companion. But Rachel was completely unconscious, unable to respond to their calls. Pikachu tossed Rachel's body onto the Byakuya's back and then jumped aboard himself. "Let's go." "Got it." With that, the Byakuya, carrying the Migo's corpse on one side and Hidan, Pikachu, and the unconscious Rachel on its back, leapt off the fortress balcony and flew into the distance. Seeing this, Camilla, one of Hyde's knights, immediately prepared to give chase. Like Rachel, she also had transformation abilities, allowing her to turn into a bat and pursue them in the air. But just as she took 2 steps, Hyde's voice stopped her. "Don't chase them." Hyde, who had been silent until now, suddenly gave the order to stand down, leaving Camilla confused. "Hyde-sama." But Hyde didn't respond to her protests. Instead, he gave a direct command. "I need some time alone. All of you, leave me." Camilla, Felicia, Richard, and the other knights looked at Hyde in silence. His eyes seemed blank and dazed, as if he were lost in some profound shock. Once the others had left, Hyde, still standing motionless, murmured to himself, "So the ninjas they spoke of really do exist. What? Only 10 million? In the exchange office, Pikachu grabbed the receptionist by the collar. "Do you have any idea where we had to go to get this thing? And now you're telling me it's only worth 10 million? Are you messing with me?" But the bounty specifically asked for the Migo's corpse, not a bucket of its corpse solution. Beside the receptionist, a metal bucket sat, half filled with a transparent, oily liquid. And the whole story began just a few hours earlier. A few hours ago, Hidan and Kakazu were returning to the shinobi world aboard a Byakuya, carrying a corpse and a captive female knight from another realm. Suddenly, Kakazu noticed that the Migo, clutched in the Byakuya's talons, was dissolving, like an ice cream melting in the summer heat. The unexpected development startled him, who thought the corpse's decomposition was due to improper preservation. Thus began his frantic efforts to save the Migo's body for the 80 million Ryo bounty. But in the end, its corpse completely liquefied, leaving only the half bucket of corpse solution behind. Forget it. Getting 10 million for the solution is better than nothing. On the other hand, Hidan, utterly uninterested in the bounty money, simply yawned. As a devout follower of the King in Yellow, his mission to kill the Migo had already been fulfilled. Pikachu glanced at the indifferent Hidan and then at the receptionist in front of him. "Looks like I'll just have to chalk this one up to bad luck. Get me that 10 million, now. Right away." Soon, the receptionist brought over a cash-filled box. Pikachu immediately opened it and began counting the money. This annoyed Hidan, who grumbled, "Seriously? You're going to count it bill by bill?" "Of course. This is my hard-earned pay. Not a single note can be missing. I'll wait outside." Hidan slung his scythe over his shoulder and walked out, leaving only him and the receptionist behind. As Kakazu clumsily counted the cash, the receptionist's eyes quietly drifted to a woman lying on the ground nearby. The woman wore purple armor, partially covered by a torn Akatsuki uniform. From the faint rise and fall of her chest, she seemed to still be alive. "May I ask, who was that?" Pikachu followed the receptionist's gaze and impatiently replied, "A woman from another world. She uses some kind of ability different from ninjutsu." The receptionist fell silent for a few seconds before speaking again. "Did you bring her back to sell her for a good price?" Pikachu's fingers stopped mid-count, and he looked up at the receptionist. "How did you know?" "I've heard plenty about your business acumen from others at the exchange office. If you are planning to sell her, why not just sell her to me?" "Sell her to you?" "Not to me personally, to our exchange office. Our office deals in high-value corpses requested by clients and also actively purchases valuable bodies. Naturally, if the target is alive, that's acceptable too." Pikachu was silent for a moment, then said, "I've taken on plenty of bounties from this office, but this is the first I've heard of such a service. If that's the case, let's talk price. How much can you offer?" 10 million. 50 million. 20 million. 50 million. 25 million. 50 million. "It seems you're not really willing to sell her." Faced with Kakazu's insincere counter-offers, the receptionist's formerly innocent expression twisted into a sly, almost sinister smile that even made Kakazu feel slightly uneasy. "Alright, 30 million then. Deal. I'll get the money for you." After a while, the receptionist brought out another money box. Once Kakazu had carefully counted every note, he left with the 2 boxes of cash. The secret door of the exchange office closed once more. In the exchange office, the receptionist slowly approached the female knight who was lying on the floor, and reached out to touch her. At that moment, Rachel's tightly closed eyes suddenly snapped open. She thrust the dagger in her hand straight toward the receptionist's neck. In truth, she had regained consciousness much earlier. However, after fighting Kakazu before, she knew she wasn't a match for him, let alone when paired with a scythe-wielding man. So, she endured, biding her time for an opportunity to escape. From overhearing the conversation between Hidan and the receptionist earlier, it was clear Kakazu held a higher status, easily intimidating the receptionist. Rachel deduced that the receptionist was likely just an ordinary person, someone she could handle. But when she finally made her move, she realized how wrong she was. Just as her dagger was about to pierce the receptionist's neck, her wrist was firmly caught. Worse yet, a brown snake slithered out from the receptionist's sleeve. The snake's body dangled in midair, hissing inches from her face. With his other hand, the receptionist peeled off the human skin mask covering his face. Underneath was a ghastly pale, emaciated visage with severely drooping inner eye corners. A dangerous yet mesmerizing aura emanated from his slightly upturned lips. A long, thin tongue slithered in and out between his lips without hindering his speech. "You've been awake for a while, haven't you? Let's get acquainted then. My name is Orochimaru. And you? Are you from another world?" Looking at the serpent-like man before her, Rachel's heart sank. She had just escaped the tiger's jaws, only to fall into the wolf's lair. In a secret hideout, Orochimaru entered, carrying a woman over his shoulder and holding a metal bucket in his hand. "Orochimaru-sama." Kabuto hurriedly stepped forward to take the woman off Orochimaru's shoulder. This woman was captured by Kakazu from another world. She has the ability to use something called the Grillstone to perform unique feats. Keep her alive for now. She might become my first vessel that doesn't require living corpse reincarnation. Understood. Kabuto secured Rachel in a cell within the hideout and quickly returned to the laboratory, where he found Orochimaru preparing a scroll. The scroll was covered in complex signs that Kabuto recognized as belonging to the Edo Tensai technique. Edo Tensai, a forbidden jutsu created by the second Hokage, had been banned by the first Hokage before its completion. Through years of research and refinement, Orochimaru had brought this technique close to perfection. He had even managed to successfully summon the third Kazekage through Edo Tensai previously. Although the resurrected Kazekage had resisted Orochimaru's control using his willpower, it was still the most successful Edo Tensai experiment to date. Kabuto knew that Edo Tensai was Orochimaru's greatest masterpiece, something he would never allow anyone else to witness in action. Understanding this, he tactfully turned to leave. "Kabuto." Orochimaru's slightly raspy voice echoed through the empty space, stopping him in his tracks. "Aren't you curious about this jutsu? If you are, I'll allow you to stay and watch. As for the target of this summoning, naturally, it's this." With that, Orochimaru raised the metal bucket in his hand, revealing that it contained the Migo Corpse solution. Chapter 169, The Dreamlands, Discovery. When Orochimaru first announced the bounty mission, he had already learned from the Necronomicon that Amigo's corpse would dissolve within a few hours of death. However, for Edo Tensai, there was no difference between the dissolved remains and a complete body. The substantial bounty offered was merely a ploy by him to lure bounty hunters. Ultimately, he planned to use the excuse of the Migo's corpse dissolving to slash the payout. After all, even for Orochimaru, the 80 million bounty was no small sum. What he didn't anticipate was that the person taking on this bounty would be Kakazu, notorious for his love of money. Still, the outcome remained unchanged. He spent only 10 million to obtain what he wanted, and even gained an unexpected bonus. "Orochimaru-sama, are you planning to summon the Migo?" Kabuto's tone was filled with disbelief as his wide eyes stared at him in shock. Although he had never personally witnessed the Edo Tensai process, he had always assumed it could only be used on humans, given that Orochimaru's experiments with Edo Tensai had always involved human subjects. But that wasn't entirely true. Orochimaru unfurled the prepared scroll on the ground. While pouring the Migo solution from the metal bucket into the blank space at the center of the ritual, he began to explain to Kabuto. Edo Tensai is, in essence, a type of summoning jutsu. It summons the soul of the deceased from the pure land of the afterlife back to this world through the impure land. To do so, a portion of the deceased's bodily remains is required. This is a prerequisite of Edo Tensai and absolutely indispensable. As the viscous solution slowly poured out of the bucket, He continued explaining the next step. In addition to summoning the soul, Edo Tensei requires a vessel to host the soul. If the target is human, then a living body will suffice. But to summon the soul of a different species, a body of the same species must be prepared. And for summoning Amigo, the host I've prepared is the Shoggoth. Orochimaru placed both hands on the scroll, and a massive array suddenly emerged from the ground, enveloping the large, amorphous black Shoggoth. This was a primordial Shoggoth that Orochimaru had acquired from the masked man and cultivated over a long period with Genjutsu. Its unique trait was that it would consider the consciousness it hosted as its master and could transform, reorganize, and evolve within the boundaries of what the master's consciousness could comprehend. These boundaries referred to forms derived from the host's inherited memories and what the host could intellectually understand. For example, a primordial Shoggoth could automatically reshape itself into a human body for Anko because it had inherited such evolutionary experience directly from her genes. Moreover, Anko's body could be reshaped based on her thoughts, its size, skin color, and even the sensitivity of her skin could be altered. However, it couldn't spontaneously generate a Sharingan or Byakugan because these were bloodline limits beyond Anko's comprehension. The Shoggoth couldn't transform into something the host couldn't mentally grasp. In theory, though, a Shoggoth possessed the ability to transform and reorganize at the genetic level. If the original host had a bloodline limit like the Sharingan or the Byakugan, it could replicate them. This extended even to the wood style of Hashirama. It was precisely because of the Shoggoth's incredible transformative abilities that Orochimaru chose it as the host for the Migos Edo Tensei. Theoretically, a Shoggoth could assume the form of any mortal creature. By preparing the original body to summon the host, the next step of this technique is to locate the soul of the intended resurrection target in the Pure Land, Orochimaru explained. All living beings, based on their deeds, good or evil, are bound to their karmic consequences. These consequences manifest in 6 destinations, known as the 6 paths. These 6 paths represent the destinations for all souls in the world and constitute what we call the Pure Land. Hearing this, Kabuto's heart skipped a beat, and a name immediately came to mind, the Sage of 6 Paths Orochimaru, sensing his thoughts, continued without hesitation. You're correct. The Sage of 6 Paths refers to these 6 realms of the Pure Land. It's said that he wielded an immensely powerful ocular jutsu called the Rinnegan and used its power to escape the cycle of reincarnation, thus achieving immortality. But that's just an exaggeration. The so-called 6 paths of the sage simply indicate that his power was vast enough to dominate all realms within the cycle of reincarnation. It doesn't mean the sage truly achieved eternal life. He outright dismissed the idea that the Sage of 6 Paths had transcended reincarnation because escaping the cycle of life and death was Orochimaru's ultimate ambition. He would never acknowledge that someone achieved his dream millennia ago. In his mind, the only true immortal who could grant him eternal life was Amratal. Orochimaru continued explaining the 6 paths to Kabuto. The 6 paths are Deva, Asura, Human, Animal, Preta, and Naraka. Deva path and Human path are the virtuous paths, where beings whose good deeds outweigh their sins experience more joy than suffering. Kabuto nodded, understanding this as the adage, good deeds bring rewards. Asura path is also a virtuous path, where beings enjoy the blessings of the heavens. However, their hearts are tainted by negativity, leading them to commit harmful deeds. As their blessings diminish, they eventually fall into the human, animal, or Naraka paths. The animal path, Preta path, and Naraka path are the evil paths, driven primarily by greed, hatred, and ignorance. To summon the soul of a specific being, you must search for them in the appropriate realm based on their actions during their lifetime. However, the souls of the truly powerful are typically found in the Deva path, Asura path, or Naraka path. For instance, someone like the first Hokage should be sought in the Deva path. Conversely, Madara would likely be in the Naraka path. And Tobirama, who despite being a brother to the first Hokage caused significant harm with his forbidden techniques, would likely reside in the Asura path. The harm Orochimaru referred to stemmed from the development of countless lethal forbidden jutsu, classified as harmful acts of ignorance. But this time, I am summoning the Migo's soul. An animal's soul should be located in the animal path. With that, he formed the snake seal with both hands, closed his eyes, and began searching. Moments later, his eyes snapped open in shock. How is this possible? It's not in the animal path? Orochimaru closed his eyes again, searching further. A few moments later, he opened them once more. Not in the Preta path either? Nor in the Naraka path? Not in the Asura path? Not in the Deva path? Could it really be in the human path? At that moment, Orochimaru's attempt to locate Migo's soul hit an impasse. The Migo's soul was entirely absent from the 6 paths. This discovery once again shattered his understanding. According to his years of research into ancient texts and ninjutsu, all beings in this world subject to birth, aging, sickness, and death would inevitably pass through the six paths upon entering the afterlife. It was precisely based on this theory that his Edo Tensei had previously been successful. Whether it was the soul of a great villain or a great saint, they could always be found within the cycle of the six paths. Although he was aware that the Migo was not a creature native to this world, theoretically, any life form experiencing death should have its soul drawn into the six paths at the moment of death. Yet now, after scouring the entire six paths, he couldn't locate its soul. Could it be that Migo has no soul? No. Impossible. Only a puppet could lack a soul. A Migo must have a soul. Orochimaru-sama? Kabuto, observing from behind, noticed Orochimaru had remained motionless for a long time and asked with some concern. Wait a little longer. Unwilling to admit failure in his demonstration, he performed the hand seals again and resumed his search within the six paths. In the luminous white world, his body appeared slightly transparent, his weightless form drifting in the realm of reincarnation. The Pure Land was a place that defied easy description. To enter the world of the six paths, one had to exist in a purely spiritual state. Thus, his current floating form was not his physical body but his soul. Should he search again in the six paths? Under normal circumstances, if one had a personal token from the deceased, such as some part of their original body, it would be very easy to locate their soul within the six paths. Missing them was almost impossible. Except in one case, the soul was not in the six paths at all. At this time, he had no knowledge of sealing techniques like the Reaper Death Seal, and naturally, he could not understand such situations. So he could only search again to confirm whether the soul had truly been missed. Just as he resolved to delve into the animal path for another look, a sudden white thread appeared in his field of vision, shooting straight toward his soul. This thread rapidly expanded as it approached him, transforming from a single thread into a massive spider web. Ah! A startled cry escaped his soul as he turned to flee. However, the spider web pursued him relentlessly, seemingly determined to trap him. Frightened, Orochimaru kept glancing back at the web that was closing in on him. Am I being punished by the heavens? Orochimaru's Edo Tensei was undoubtedly a desecration of the dead, summoning deceased souls to the physical world and exploiting them. This not only violated the will of the deceased but also disrupted their journey into reincarnation, since the six paths represented a fundamental law of the world. Those who defied it were bound to face consequences. So he viewed the enormous spider web as his punishment. No matter how fast his soul floated, it couldn't outrun the spider web. In no time, the web expanded rapidly. I am the one destined to unravel all the truths of this world. How could I end up in a place like this? Ah! The spider web swiftly entangled his entire form. Once fragile in the real world, the web now felt as strong as a diamond, binding Orochimaru's soul tightly. When his soul regained consciousness, he was shocked to find that the pure land around him had vanished entirely. In its place was a city that appeared not far away. This city floated in towering seas of clouds, and he found himself hovering above it. Where is this? Confronted by this dreamlike and unfamiliar world, he couldn't help but marvel in disbelief. A strong sense of mystery surrounded the city, and even someone like him, who had unraveled many secrets through the Necronomicon, was compelled to sincerely admire the grandeur of this fantastical megacity. Suddenly, he felt his body becoming weightless, a suffocating sensation akin to drowning overwhelming him. Yet, his physical senses told him he was in a state of accelerating free fall. The descent made Orochimaru feel as though he had leapt into an endless void. Around him, incomprehensible and terrifying shadows of invisible darkness flickered past, accompanied by radiant orbs of light and the manic laughter of winged creatures. Then, a massive rift of light appeared along his descent, pulling his body into it. Passing through this rift, the sensations of drowning and weightlessness vanished. He now felt his feet firmly planted on solid ground. Looking around, he realized he was standing on a street. On either side of the street were humans dressed in bizarre clothing. In the windows of the city's buildings, Orochimaru could see indistinct shadows swirling in the darkness. Yet the residents paid these shadows no mind, as though they were accustomed to their presence. What would terrify people in the physical world seemed to be an integrated part of society in this world. Then, he noticed an elderly man walking along the street, clad in a white robe and a towering hat. The man's distinctive goatee immediately made Orochimaru recognize him. Abdul Al-Hazred. The elder brushed past him without so much as glancing at him, while Orochimaru stared at him unabashedly. As the elder's figure moved farther away, he finally snapped out of his daze. Abdul. Hearing the name, the elder suddenly stopped in his tracks, turned, and looked at Orochimaru. Do you know me? It's me. I'm Orochimaru. The ninja who once spoke with you. His face reflected the same fervent curiosity he had displayed in the past, but the elder's expression remained blank. After a moment of thought, the elder smiled faintly, as if he had just understood something. "Ah, I see. You're talking about that Abdul al-Hazred, right? I am not that Abdul. Although our are the same, I am me, and he is him." Faced with this strange explanation, Orochimaru was momentarily stunned, but he quickly realized what the elder meant. The name Abdul al-Hazred was not the identity of a single individual but a collective title shared by many. The Abdul he had encountered in the nameless city was not the same as the elder before him, they were two entirely different people. Once he understood this, his expression became more composed. He then asked, "Is this place part of the 6 paths of reincarnation?" The elder first showed a look of surprise, then chuckled lightly. "The 6 paths? No, this is the Dreamland." Chapter 170, The Dreamlands, Dream or Dreamland? This term was both unfamiliar and familiar to Orochimaru. During his time in the Nameless City, another Abdul had once mentioned the Dreamland. At the time, however, the old man didn't have a chance to explain what the Dreamland truly was, and Orochimaru hadn't paid much attention to it. But unexpectedly, while using Edo Tensei, he accidentally entered this so-called Dreamland. The Dreamland is a parallel dimension constructed from the subconscious and imagination of humanity. Although many aspects here resemble the real world, the physical laws here differ significantly. You could say this place is the mirror of the universe. In this realm, the earth is flat, and you can sail by sea to reach the moon. Life here is perpetually fixed in the medieval period of the First Era. The old man's words didn't confuse him, as during his previous conversation in the Nameless City, he had already learned the meanings of terms like Earth and First Age. Moreover, the old man from the Nameless City had mentioned these terms before, and now this elder was using them again. This only confirmed. It proved that the previous elder hadn't been deceiving him. This was indeed the truth of this world. "Why, then, have I entered the Dreamland?" Orochimaru asked again. The elder gently stroked his beard. "There are many ways to enter the Dreamland, but the most common one is through dreaming." "Impossible. I am not dreaming," Orochimaru immediately denied it. He was certain he hadn't been asleep or dreaming just moments ago. "Then could you describe how you got here?" Orochimaru promptly recounted his experience of using Edo Tensei to enter the Pure Land, and then encountering a massive spiderweb. "I think I understand what you mean," the elder mused. "In other words, you entered this place in your soul form." "That's not entirely impossible. Another way to enter the Dreamland is when a dreamer dies. Their soul also enters this realm and permanently becomes a resident here." Orochimaru was silent for a few seconds, then asked with a peculiar expression, "Are you saying that I've already died in the real world?" The elder shook his head. "Not necessarily. I'm simply saying that souls can also enter the Dreamland. And besides, you are not a dreamer." "A dreamer?" Orochimaru asked in confusion. A dreamer is someone with a vivid imagination who can embrace the various absurdities of the Dreamland, thus becoming a dreamer. Dreamers not only have their souls permanently remain in the Dreamland after death but also can use their imagination to create many things within it. And I am a dreamer." As he spoke, the elder raised his hand and pointed to the sky. Orochimaru instinctively followed the direction of the elder's finger and saw a pink form materializing out of nowhere in the sky under the sunlight. Amigo. He instantly recognized the form. It was precisely the entity he had been seeking. The elder's astonishing power captivated him. Such an ability, which completely transcended common sense, might only be possible within this realm, but Dreamland was still a world. The elder's capabilities were nearing divinity. That is the soul of Amigo. In fact, Migos are entities capable of traveling freely between various parallel universes. They can also enter and exit the Dreamland at will. Consider it a gift, young friend. The Migo descended slowly from the sky and stopped beside Orochimaru. Just as he was about to lift his head to say something, he noticed that the buildings around him had vanished. The clear sky and the elder were gone as well. In their place was the Edo Tensei ritual array and the familiar surroundings of his laboratory. In an instant, he had returned from the Dreamland to reality. Orochimaru quickly turned to the center of the Edo Tensei ritual. There, the Shoggoth was undergoing rapid transformations and restructuring. The chaotic, amorphous mass reshaped itself several times until it assumed the form of its intended host. Before long, a living, breathing Migo emerged. This was the first stage of the Edo Tensei process. The soul drawn back from another world would take residence in a living vessel. In this case, the Migo's soul inhabited the body of the Shoggoth, causing it to recognize the Migo as its master and reshape itself into the Migo's form. The next step was the second stage of the Edo Tensei ritual. Impure earth would manifest from the ritual to reconstruct the host into its original, living form. Gray-white fragments of impure earth appeared out of thin air, swirling like paper around the Migo. However, the impure earth merely hovered briefly and then fell back to the ground. Because the Shoggoth, already guided by the Mi-Go's soul, had transformed itself perfectly into its original form, there was no need for the impure earth to alter its shape further. Nevertheless, if the Mi-Go were ever injured, it would still activate to repair its form instantly, maintaining the functionality of the Edo Tensai technique. Taking advantage of the moment when the Mi-Go had not yet fully adapted to the Shoggoth's body, Orochimaru swiftly leapt beside the creature. He plunged a kunai embedded with seals into the elliptical brain of the Mi-Go. This will implant the original host's personality, ensuring that it obeys me. With that, the Edo Tensai ritual array disappeared, marking the completion of the summoning. Orochimaru jumped back to stand beside Kabuto, both watching intently as this thrilling moment unfolded. The room fell silent for a few seconds. Then, the Mi-Go's body slowly began to rise. The tendrils on its brain twitched furiously, seemingly scanning its surroundings. Bzzzzz. This place is... A strange, high-frequency humming sound emanated from the Mi-Go before it spoke in a distinct human language. Orochimaru did not respond, merely watching with a wide, twisted grin. The Mi-Go was a species devoted to technological advancement, particularly in the field of biotechnology. Their capabilities far surpassed even Orochimaru's. His intent was clear, to exploit the Mi-Go's racial talents and make it his experimental assistant. He had considered using human researchers before, but their abilities were ultimately limited. While Kabuto was skilled, his talents were more in replication and support. When it came to tackling truly advanced technological challenges, his contributions were less than a tenth of what the Mi-Go could offer. Especially in areas involving ancient beings and the biotechnology of entities like primordial Shoggoths, its expertise was unparalleled. Recently, he had subdued a ninja clan known as the Fuma clan in the land of the rice fields and was preparing to establish his own ninja village. With a village of his own, the Mi-Go, and his mastery of biological modification techniques and samples, he could create a powerful ninja army. With such an army, he could accelerate the realization of his grand ambition, to collect all 3 silver keys, open the gate of the truth, and unlock all the knowledge and truths of the universe. In the pitch-black hall, 3 shadowy figures knelt on one knee before a throne, delivering their report to the person seated there. Kojiro-sama, recently, Hidden Mist Village has been frequently dispatching ninja to the neighboring countries we've already brought under our control, probing for information about our secret cult. Additionally, they previously sent one of the 7 ninja swordsmen into the land of gods to gather intelligence and even abducted a deep one. It seems they've already taken notice of us. They might already be preparing to make a move against us. I see. You may withdraw for now. Yes. The 3 shadows vanished instantly, leaving Kojiro deep in thought. Thanks to a substantial financial foundation and the spreading influence of the Cthulhu statues, the cult had been growing at an astonishing rate. Currently, cult followers spanned across several island nations surrounding the Land of Water, even successfully manipulating some smaller nations and remote areas. However, recently, Kojiro had received frequent reports of Hidden Mist Village ninja infiltrating these regions to gather intelligence. This was a source of great frustration for him. Kojiro did not want to draw too much attention for now, especially from the Land of Water. What's more, he was confident that his actions wouldn't attract their scrutiny. The Land of Water, a nation surrounded by the sea, consisted of the main island and numerous smaller islands with diverse cultures and customs. Due to historical reasons, the daimyo of the Land of Water had once decreed that the nation would fully respect the traditions of these neighboring islands and would not impose its power on them. This policy had allowed the surrounding islands to coexist peacefully for a long time. However, the recent espionage activities by Hidden Mist Village clearly went against the policies set by the daimyo. To seek protection from one of the 5 great nations, the smaller islands without ninja regularly paid tribute to the Land of Water as a form of protection money. Even under Kojiro's control, these islands continued paying the tribute in full. After all, wealth was the least of his concerns. The factory in the Land of Gods had been continuously operating since its establishment. Moreover, the lords and daimyos of these islands had either been converted into cult followers or discreetly eliminated. There was no one left to seek the Land of Water's aid. First, there was no infringement on the Land of Water's interests. Second, there was no one left to report the situation. Thus, the Land of Water had no grounds to send shinobi into his domain. The decision could only have come from Kiri's upper echelon. Hidden Mist Village had 2 factions in power, one led by Elder Genji and the other by the 4th Mizukage. Only these 2 had the authority to issue such orders. Elder Genji, being a staunchly cautious leader, would never go against the daimyo's policies and wishes. This left only Yagura, the 4th Mizukage. Kojiro didn't have a deep impression of him, only knowing he looked exceptionally young, with a strikingly handsome, boyish face, though he was actually a few years older than him. However, Kojiro was well aware of the bloody history of the bloody mist created under Yagura's reign. From a certain point onward, Yagura had begun persecuting families with bloodline limits within Kiri, especially prominent clans like the Hazuki. The Hoshigaki clan, to which Kojiro belonged, had also suffered under Yagura's policies. Young ninja from the Hoshigaki clan were frequently sent on suicidal missions at his orders. Thus, Kojiro's impression of the fourth Mizukage was far from favorable. There was even a time when he wanted to personally kill Yagura. However, Yagura's strength was undeniable. As the perfect Jinchuriki of the three tails, he always held an advantage over Kojiro. But now, he looked down at his massive hand, glowing faintly with a pale green light, and clenched it into a fist. At that moment, a strange presence emerged in the hall. Kojiro quickly looked toward the source, spotting a dark silhouette flanked by two distorted air masses. Seeing this, his cautious gaze relaxed, for vigilance was meaningless before this individual. "What brings you here?" "Running into trouble recently, I see." "Just a small problem, like getting a fishbone stuck in my throat while eating." "You mean Yagura, right?" "How do you know?" There was a hint of surprise in Kojiro's tone. "I know many things. For instance, I know that Yagura is actually being controlled." This revelation shocked Kojiro even more. Striving to maintain his composure, he asked, "Controlled? What do you mean?" "Exactly what it sounds like. For a long time, he has been nothing more than a puppet. The bloody mist was established under the manipulation of someone else. Who? Who could possibly control the fourth Mizukage? He currently hides with an Akatsuki." "Akatsuki? Are they another cult devoted to some wicked god?" The Black Pharaoh's reply fueled Kojiro's curiosity. He had never heard of Akatsuki before. "No. Akatsuki is merely a typical war organization. They don't share your lofty aspirations. However, you've encountered members of Akatsuki before. Remember the three ninja who invaded the land of gods? Two of them fought you. They were members of Akatsuki." With the Black Pharaoh's reminder, Kojiro recalled the incident and narrowed his eyes. So, it was them. Before the Black Pharaoh's explanation, Kojiro had been puzzled. Why would Juzo, a Hidden Mist Village ninja, act alongside an Uchiha from Hidden Leaf Village? But now it all made sense. After ensuring Kojiro had digested the information, the Black Pharaoh continued, "Akatsuki is currently trying to recruit a ninja from Hidden Mist Village into their ranks. If you want to uncover the mastermind behind Akatsuki, I have a plan. This plan not only places this ninja as your spy but also removes the fishbone stuck in your throat. Are you interested?" After a moment of silence, Kojiro asked, "Who is this Hidden Mist Village ninja Akatsuki plans to recruit?" He. "It's someone you should be familiar with. After all, he shares your surname, Hoshigaki." Chapter 171, The Shark, Contact in a Forest. A young ninja with blue skin and a shark-like face was leading a group of ninjas swiftly across the treetops, heading toward a specific destination. Since Kisame was assigned as the exclusive subordinate of Fuki, this was the first time he had received a mission directly from the fourth Mizukage. The mission itself seems simple: investigate a small, remote mountain village. Although he wasn't sure what was in that village, the fact that the fourth Mizukage bypassed Fuki to assign the task to him was something worth pondering. Suddenly, there was a disturbance in the canopy ahead. The subtle commotion immediately caught his attention. "Stop!" He and the three other ninjas accompanying him landed on the ground at once. At the same time, a shadowy figure leapt down from the treetops ahead, standing opposite Kisame. Squinting, he saw a peculiar man dressed in a black robe with white bandages wrapped around his face. Behind this man was something wrapped in white bandages, and from its outline, it appeared to be a large, broad-bladed sword. "You are..." He narrowed his eyes as he observed the strange figure blocking his path. A strange sense of familiarity washed over him, as if he had seen this attire somewhere before. Before he could determine the source of this familiarity, the strange man reached for the hilt of the broad-bladed sword behind him. This was an unmistakable act of aggression. The ninjas behind him wasted no time. Drawing their katana, they charged toward the strange man. In the next moment, the man gripped the sword's hilt firmly, causing the white bandages wrapping the blade to unravel rapidly. Kisame and the three Hidden Mist Village ninjas immediately saw the true form of the weapon. That's the Executioner's Blade. As Hidden Mist Village ninjas, they were all familiar with the 7 ninja swords of the mist. Furthermore, it was their sworn duty to reclaim any of the 7 swords found in the possession of outsiders, regardless of the cost. Who would have thought such a boring mission would deliver such a big fish? Well, we won't hold back. With that, the 3 mist ninjas leapt toward the man with the Executioner's Blade from 3 different directions, intending to finish him in a coordinated strike they believed was inescapable. However, just as their katana were about to strike the man's head, the Executioner's Blade moved. In an instant, the blade, despite its apparent bulk, was effortlessly raised by the man with one hand, blocking all three katanas simultaneously. So fast. One of the mist ninjas exclaimed in shock. But before his words had fully left his mouth, the man's speed surged again. With a quick upward push, the man deflected all three katana into the air. He then swung the executioner's blade horizontally in one smooth motion. In an instant, the bodies of the three hidden mist village ninjas were cleaved in half. 3 fountains of blood erupted from their torsos, filling the once sweet scent of the grassy forest with a sharp, iron tang. Their 6 severed pieces fell to the ground, and the man turned his gaze toward Kisame, who had yet to make a move. Despite the brutal deaths of his companions, Kisame's expression remained unchanged, his demeanor cold and indifferent. He had witnessed too many deaths of comrades, many of whom he had killed with his own hands. By now, he was emotionally numb. But one question lingered in Kisame's mind: who exactly was this man? The previous wielder of the executioner's blade was Juzo. Could it be him? Juzo? He tentatively asked, but the strange man did not respond. Instead, he swung the executioner's blade from side to side before charging directly at Kisame. Not speaking, huh? Then it seems I'll have to use force. Kisame drew the katana from his back and rushed forward to meet the attack. The clash of their blades sparked violently, and the battle immediately became intense. The two moved with incredible speed, dodging and counterattacking. Neither could gain the upper hand for the time being. However, Kisame soon began to feel the strain. The executioner's blade was designed for overwhelming power, and while his natural strength allowed him to hold his ground with a regular katana, the blade's edge started to dull and chip under the relentless pressure. At this point, he did not yet possess Seimata, and his current weapon was no match for the executioner's blade. Although the blade was said to be the weakest of the 7 ninja swords in terms of special abilities, it was still far superior to an ordinary weapon. Damn it. He glanced at his steel katana. If the battle continued like this, his sword would break. If weapons and taijutsu couldn't decide the fight, it would have to be ninjutsu. Having made up his mind, he leapt onto the canopy of a towering tree and quickly formed hand signs for a jutsu. Water style, exploding water shock wave. A massive torrent of water erupted from his mouth, rushing toward the strange man below like a raging flood. The overwhelming surge engulfed the man entirely. Is it over? The man was nowhere to be seen on the water's surface. Kisame waited several minutes, but no one emerged, leaving him somewhat disappointed. The technique was not meant to be used alone, it was typically combined with summoning sharks to eliminate enemies in the water. He would use the wave to create a suitable environment for his summoned sharks to hunt and kill. But this time, the flood seemed to have done the job before the sharks could appear. Guess I'll have to spend some time retrieving the sword. He looked down at the deep waters below, feeling slightly resigned. Even he didn't know where the executioner's blade or the man's body might have been swept. Regardless, the blade had to be recovered. Kisame jumped from the tree canopy onto the water's surface to begin his search. Just then, a hand emerged from the water behind him, grabbing his ankle. What? Water style, water prison jutsu. From the hand gripping his ankle, water surged upward, forming a spherical prison around Kisame, trapping him entirely. This technique wouldn't harm him physically, but he was completely immobilized inside, unable to perform hand signs. Being familiar with the jutsu, he knew exactly how helpless the situation was. Through the watery barrier, he watched as the strange man rose slowly from the depths. If this man could use the water prison, there was no doubt he was a hidden mist village ninja. But who was he? And what would he do next? As he pondered the possibilities, the situation took an unexpected turn. The man removed his hand from the water sphere, breaking the jutsu and freeing Kisame. He dropped to his knees on the water's surface, confused, and looked up at the man. His bewildered gaze seemed to ask, why? The man slowly removed the bandages from his face as he spoke. The child I once knew has grown into a man. Not bad. It's been a long time. Kisame. Seeing the face beneath the bandages, Kisame's expression shifted from confusion to shock. Uncle. The Hoshigaki clan, one of the prestigious families of Kiri, was second only to the Hazuki clan, which once produced a Mizukage. The Hoshigaki clan was divided into 2 subfamilies, the Shark faction and the Whale faction, akin to the main and branch families of the Hyuga clan. However, unlike the Hyuga clan's hierarchy, the Shark and Whale factions were completely equal, with their distinctions based solely on the secret techniques they practiced. The Shark faction trained in the Shark secret jutsu, which resulted in members developing shark-like facial features and sharp, shark-like teeth. The Whale faction, on the other hand, practiced the Whale secret jutsu, and their facial features remain nearly indistinguishable from those of ordinary people. Neither the Shark nor the Whale secret jutsus were inherently superior, but in terms of combat attributes, Whale faction ninjas were slightly stronger. However, the whale faction suffered from low fertility rates. Members could produce at most 2 offspring in their lifetime, with most having only 1 or none. Some speculated that this was due to the whale secret jutsu, which reduced the overall fertility of the clan. This mirrors whales in nature, known for their low reproductive rates. Combined with the toll taken by past ninja world wars, the whale faction's numbers had dwindled further. After the death of the third Mizukage, the entire Hoshigaki clan sought to preserve the whale faction by nominating Kojiro as the fourth Mizukage to revitalize the declining faction. This marked a historical first for the Hoshigaki clan, as it was composed of 2 equal subfamilies, making it challenging to choose a leader suitable for the Mizukage position. Ultimately, their plan to secure the fourth Mizukage position was thwarted by another one. Yagura emerged as a formidable contender, having successfully subdued the Wild Three Tails, becoming one of the rare perfect Jinchuriki. He defeated Kojiro and became the fourth Mizukage. As the fourth Mizukage, he began forming his own elite force, the 7 Ninja Swordsmen of the Mist. When choosing the wielder of the Executioner's Blade, he initially intended for Kojiro to wield it, but Kojiro refused. Later, Yagura transformed the Hidden Mist into the Bloody Mist. Among the many ninjas who defected from the village during this period was Kojiro, who has been in exile for 7 years. To this day, Kisame remembered the face of his uncle. "Why is it you?" He could never have imagined that the wielder of the Executioner's Blade was none other than Kojiro, who had vanished 7 years ago after rejecting the blade. Kojiro smiled faintly without answering. He swung the Executioner's Blade a couple of times, then glanced at it disdainfully and shook his head. "This thing limits me after all. Take it back." He threw the blade into the darkness, where another figure caught it effortlessly and strapped it to their back. Someone else was nearby? And it seemed this person was the true wielder of the Executioner's Blade, with Kojiro merely borrowing it? If borrowing it alone could yield such power, how formidable must the true wielder be? After returning the blade to Zabusa, who had been hiding in the shadows, Kojiro said slowly, "The last time we met, you had just become a Genin. I didn't expect you to grow so strong so quickly. Impressive." He looked at Kisame with the gaze of a mentor appreciating his protege, praising his nephew's progress and current abilities. But Kisame knew that his uncle had held back significantly, otherwise, he would already be a corpse. The fact that he was still alive meant that Kojiro still cared about their familial bond. "By the way, how is Hoshigaki clan doing since I left?" Kojiro suddenly asked. "Why the sudden interest in the clan? Wasn't it you who abandoned everything to defect from Kiri?" Although Kisame was surprised by his sudden interest, he still recounted the state of the Hoshigaki clan after his uncle's defection. "After you left, the fourth Mizukage carried out a massive purge of the Hoshigaki clan. While the Shark faction was affected somewhat, the main target of the purge was the Whale faction. Now, there are none of them left in Kiri." Kisame spoke the last sentence cautiously, probing for a reaction. After finishing, he fixed his gaze on Kojiro's back, not daring to look away. The silence lingered for a long time until a low, mournful sound emanated from Kojiro's shadowed figure. The sound was like a lament, as though he was grieving the fate of the Whale faction. But for some reason, he couldn't shake the feeling that something about it was insincere. Suddenly, Kojiro turned and gripped his shoulders, speaking passionately. "Arkan of yesterday may be gone. But Arkan of today will share eternal life with us. In the presence of our true ancestors." His sudden fervor left Kisame momentarily at a loss. What are you talking about?" Kojiro didn't immediately explain. Instead, he leapt into the treetops and called back, "If you want to know the whole truth, follow me to a certain place." With that, he vanished. Though Kojiro left him to decide whether to follow or stay, Kisame caught a glimpse of the figure in the shadows behind him, the one carrying the Executioner's Blade, silently waiting for him to move. He realized he had no choice. Guided by Kojiro, he arrived at a cliff by the sea. At the edge of the cliff, a tall figure was already waiting. This man, clad in a resplendent robe, stood imposing and solemn. His skin was dark, his gaze piercing. Just one glance from him made Kisame feel as though his soul had been laid bare. Behind the man, the air twisted strangely, as if something immense and horrifying lurked unseen within the distortion. "You've come. Allow me to introduce myself. I am your uncle's associate. You may call me the Black Pharaoh." His polite introduction left Kisame nodding blankly. This person seemed to know everything about him, while he knew absolutely nothing in return, a dynamic he deeply disliked. Before he could process his unease, Kojiro draped an arm over his shoulders, pulling him close like a father embracing his child. He pointed toward the vast sea beyond the cliff. "Kisame. In truth, we of the Hoshigaki clan are not descendants of humans. Our ancestors were far greater beings. Our forebears came from the depths of the ocean, A race devoted to an ancient, divine being. That divine being is the great Father and Savior. The Lord of Light. Cthulhu. Crack. A lightning bolt illuminated the dark sea, and for a moment, the water glowed eerily bright. In that brief flash, thousands of dark green, fish-headed humanoid creatures were revealed, lurking just beneath the surface. Chapter 172, The Shark, Father of all sharks. Thousands of fish-headed beings lurked just beneath the murky sea surface. Although it was only for a fleeting moment, Kisame caught a clear glimpse of their faces. At first glance, Kisame even felt that these fish-headed beings bore a striking resemblance, 7/10, at least, to his own shark-like features. Look! There are kin. Our kin are all watching you. With a wave of his massive hand, Kojiro commanded the thousands of fish-headed beings, who let out hoarse, piercing cries before surging toward the shore. At the shore lay one of the major ports of the Land of Water, a harbor where over a dozen large ships and several dozen mid-sized fishing vessels were docked. This is... Kisame was stunned by what he saw. It appeared that Kojiro could control these fish-headed beings. Now it's time for you to prove your loyalty. Kojiro turned to him, patting his shoulder before glancing at the Black Pharaoh. The Black Pharaoh stepped forward, pulling a bright white object from his cloak and placing it before Kisame. Drop your blood onto this. Kisame focused his gaze on the object in the Black Pharaoh's hand, a massive, razor-sharp shark tooth. This shark tooth was larger than a fully outstretched human hand and emitted a faint white glow. It was hard to imagine the size of the shark from which this tooth had come. Under the expectant gaze of Kojiro, he knew he could not refuse. Resolutely, he unsheathed the katana on his back, sliced a cut into his palm, and let his blood drip onto the shark tooth. To his surprise, his blood was immediately absorbed into the tooth, leaving only a faint red stain on the glossy, pale enamel surface. The Black Pharaoh raised the shark tooth high with one hand, chanting an obscure and complex incantation, before throwing the tooth into the sea. A small splash rippled across the calm surface of the water before it returned to stillness. But in the next moment, Kisame heard a deep hum emanating from the ocean depths, a sound akin to a titan of the deep swinging a colossal anchor. Just hearing the sound seemed to pull his thoughts into the vast abyss of the ocean. In the depths of the sea, he felt as though his eyes were shrouded by a veil of hazy green. The veil drifted and swayed freely with the ocean currents, until distorted rays of sunlight pierced through, dissipating it. Behind the green veil lay a shadowy figure lurking in the darkness of the ocean depths. He could not discern the precise form of the shadow but could make out a rough silhouette, bloated and massive, with skeletal, malnourished wings and long, tentacle-like appendages swaying chaotically like the limbs of an octopus. Suddenly, the shadow stirred from the darkness. The enormous green body lumbered out of the abyss, shoving its way into his line of sight. He saw its slick, slimy surface, scale-like gelatinous substance, and enormous clawed feet. In an instant, a green light enveloped the grotesque, bloated figure, making it resemble a colossal green mountain striding between heaven and earth. Back on the surface, a massive whirlpool began to form, rapidly expanding as though stirred by the hand of some unknown giant. At the center of the whirlpool, a gloomy white light pierced through the deep, shadowy waters, casting an unearthly glow across the entire sea. The sailors on the ships were drawn to the sudden luminescence on the water's surface and rushed onto the decks to see what was happening. Look! The sea is glowing. What is that? I'm not sure, but something seems to be coming up from the depths. Their attention fixed on the distant glow, the sailors failed to notice the chaos unfolding right under their noses. It wasn't until a scream tore through the night that they realized something was amiss. The sailors turned to see hordes of deep ones surging toward the port like a relentless tide. What are those creatures? Monsters. Run for your lives. Help. Someone save me. The merciless deep ones, armed with customized iron picks and anchors, stormed into the crowd, slaughtering indiscriminately. They were as relentless and emotionless as humans chopping down trees. The sailors, never having encountered such a horrifying sight, were paralyzed with fear. Most could do nothing but flee in panic. Only a few calm individuals thought to sound the alarm, alerting the entire port to the invasion. Through the experienced observation of some veteran sailors, it was noted that the fish-headed creatures climbed ashore from the sea and then boarded the ships docked at the harbor. As long as the ships could sail out to open waters, they could escape these fish-headed attackers. Get out to sea. Hurry. The crew resisted the deep one's assault in the narrow corridors while simultaneously pulling up the anchors, preparing to sail away from the port, which had been overwhelmed by the invaders. This decisive and calm strategy proved effective. Within a short time, over a dozen ships managed to leave the harbor. The deep ones didn't pursue, they merely stood at the harbor's edge, silently watching the ships sail into the open sea. Not only that, but the deep ones that had already climbed aboard the ships seemed to grow fearful of the resilient human resistance. They stopped fighting, scrambled over the railings, and fled back into the ocean. With the deep ones driven away from the ships, the vast numbers remaining at the harbor could do nothing but look on in frustration. The surviving crew felt a glimmer of hope. Victory seemed within reach. The news of the port attack had already been relayed to the land of water, and they trusted that ninja reinforcements would soon arrive. All they needed to do was wait on the ships until dawn to survive. We made it. The survivors were ecstatic. The overwhelming relief of escaping death filled the air with cheers and shouts of triumph. Yet, one observant sailor stood quietly, replaying in his mind the expression on the faces of the fish-headed creatures as they fled. On their grotesque fish-like faces, there seemed to be an emotion resembling fear, perhaps even terror. What were they afraid of? Were they afraid of us? Why would they fear us? After all, they had been the ones who launched the attack. Suddenly, a flash of realization struck the sailor. It was as though a puzzle piece clicked into place in his mind. Without hesitation, he pushed through the crowd and sprinted from the stern to the bow. At the bow, he was gripping the railing, his eyes fixed intently on the ocean. The murky white light they had first seen on the surface was now growing brighter, its intensity swelling as the whirlpool at its center spun ever more violently. Upon closer inspection, the observant sailor realized that the light wasn't static, it was moving in a spiral-like pattern, with its brightest point constantly shifting. The fish-headed creatures weren't afraid of humans, they were afraid of it. In an instant, a colossal figure burst forth from the whirlpool. The body, surging skyward. For a fleeting moment, the sailor could clearly make out the form of the massive being. It bore an uncanny resemblance to the prehistoric megalodon, the ancient ancestor of the great white shark, but its size was at least twice as massive. Ethereal white light radiated from its enormous form, casting a haunting glow across the pitch-black night, spreading its terrifying presence far and wide. It was the father of all sharks. It was an avatar of Cthulhu. This avatar symbolized violence and destruction. It possessed a terrifying bite, capable of tearing through warship steel plates and the thick hide of whales as effortlessly as biting into a cracker. With its massive form, it could swallow objects several meters long with ease. No living creature in the ocean could escape its attacks. Its colossal size often led to it being mistaken for a whale and served as the prototype for the demonic sea monster Leviathan described in the Bible. As a result, this avatar of Cthulhu was revered as a deity by primitive civilizations and tribes for a long time. However, this reverence stemmed not from worship but from a plea for protection against its wrath. The method of summoning the it was well known among the Deep Ones, but they couldn't control its actions. When the Deep Ones faced threats from humanity, they summoned the father of all sharks to attack human ports, coastal cities, or even naval fleets. In this particular world, however, it was summoned using a mysterious artifact. The tooth of the father of all sharks. This item allowed the summoning of the father of all sharks. This avatar was too savage and incapable of communication, making it uncontrollable by anyone. By dripping blood onto the surface of the tooth, one can summon the avatar at will. However, the summoner was inevitably consumed by the avatar itself. Its size decreased in non-aquatic environments but increases significantly in the ocean. At that moment, Kisame's shark-like face bore an incredibly complex expression, his eyes reflecting 3 parts anticipation, 3 parts fear, and 4 parts confusion. Although the Black Pharaoh had only made Kisame drip his blood onto the tooth to establish a connection with the father of all sharks, to the average person, it appeared as though Kisame had summoned the avatar with his blood. The Black Pharaoh even told Kisame as much, explaining that summoning the father of all sharks required the blood of the Hoshigaki clan's shark lineage, and Kisame's blood was the most suitable. Thus, this hasty ritual came to fruition. In reality, any human blood would have sufficed. Although shark-like in species, the avatar's activities were not confined to the ocean. However, it was in the ocean that its powers reached their peak. Its body emitted a glow that illuminates the dark sea, allowing both onlookers atop cliffs and sailors aboard ships to witness its emergence. What is that? It's a shark, right? How can a shark be that enormous? It's the size of a whale. Before the sailors could process the sight of a shark so massive and glowing with white light, the father of all sharks was already attacking the fleet. Using its enormous body, it repeatedly rammed into the vessels, creating chaos as the sailors were thrown off balance. Clinging desperately to the railings, their grip slipped, sending them plunging into the sea below. Some medium-sized ships were capsized outright by a single lash of its tail, tossing the sailors into the water, only to be devoured one by one in its gaping maw. The father of all sharks was insatiable, consumed by an unending hunger that drove its frenzied devouring of everything around it. It existed purely to feed, ceasing its rampage only when the waters it visited were void of prey. Much like an eternally starving predator, it would continue hunting relentlessly. The screams of pain and terror echoed endlessly across the sea, yet there was no trace of sorrow on the faces of those watching from the shore, Kisame, Zabusa, and Kojiro. Their expressions were devoid of pity. On the docks, thousands of deep ones stood motionless, gazing at the father of all sharks as it tore through human lives. Even the sailors attempting to flee in lifeboats were consumed, boat and all, by the monstrous maw. Despite their loyalty, none of the deep ones dared to enter the water. They knew all too well that the father of all sharks would not spare any potential prey, even its most devoted servants. Is this truly my ancestor? In that moment, Kisame felt a sense of clarity dawning within him. For years, as a ninja of Kiri, he had been forced to carry out vile tasks under the orders of his superiors, often slaughtering his own comrades. This life of deceit and bloodshed had driven him into a spiral of existential doubt. Was he friend or foe? What was his purpose? Where did he stand? Where was he heading? Where would he find peace? The only thing he could truly feel was his own falseness, a hollow existence defined by lies and betrayal. But now, for the first time, he felt as though he might escape the pain of his emptiness. The father of all sharks, a being that could only be summoned by his blood, this was his ancestor, his origin. The place he was destined to return to could only be where his ancestor dwelled, the underwater city of R'lyeh. Only there could he find a sense of peace and belonging. In that city, his shark-like visage would no longer mark him as an outcast. In that city, he would be among countless kin, his father, grandfather, great-grandfather, and countless others awaiting him. Chapter 173, The Shark, Mizukage-sama. The port of the Land of Water is under attack by unidentified creatures. The daimyo has ordered us to act immediately and minimize the damage. Understood. Organize a ninja squad and deploy immediately. Within Kiri, a group of 10-plus ninjas led by the 4th Mizukage set out swiftly, leaping over the walls of the village. At this hour, most of the village was still deep in slumber. However, a few watchful eyes observed their departure. The Mizukage has left the village. By the window, one of the elite jonin of the Kiri, had the veins around his right eye bulging as he removed his usual black eye patch. Underneath lay a single, pure white eye. If the Hyuga clan were to see this eye, they would undoubtedly stop at nothing to reclaim it. It was none other than the Byakugan. This was a trophy Ao had obtained in his early years during a battle with a Hyuga clan member. Though he had only acquired one Byakugan, its scouting capabilities made him one of the top reconnaissance ninjas in Kiri, enabling him to monitor the movements of Yagura even on this foggy night. Of course, he alone would not dare act so audaciously. Behind him stood Mai, along with another high-ranking authority figure, the village elder, Genji. Why would the Mizukage leave the village at this hour? Mai pondered over the Mizukage's abrupt midnight departure. Could it be some urgent mission? As Yagura moved out of the Byakugan's detection range, Ao retracted his vision and began discussing with Mai. But no matter how urgent the mission, he should have informed Genji-sama first. Genji-sama, what do you think? When Mai turned to look at Genji, she found that the elder, seated in his chair, had fallen asleep at some point. Well, he is getting on in years and can't stay up this late. Ao looked awkward. Initially, he and Mai had intended to highlight the Mizukage's unusual behavior to Genji, but it turned out that the elder had dozed off. I'll escort him back to rest first. Keep monitoring to see when the Mizukage returns. Then, immediately find out why he left the village. Understood. The ever-reliable scout, nodded in agreement. The Mizukage's actions have been increasingly strange lately, working exclusively during the dead of night when Genji-sama is asleep, and frequently sending ninjas to spy on neighboring countries with whom the Land of Water has formed friendly alliances. Now that Genji-sama has grown old and can no longer match the Mizukage in any aspect, he can only yield to him. If that person were still here, they might be able to counterbalance the Mizukage's authority. That person, of course, knew exactly whom I was referring to. The only person in Hidden Mist Village who once rivaled Yagura in power and influence was the man who had almost claimed the title of Mizukage himself. This individual surpassed both Mai and Ao in both skill and seniority, and he had even refused an invitation to join the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist. If he were still in the village, he could undoubtedly bolster Genji's faction's voice. But unfortunately, he had already defected. Hey! Yagura! Yagura! In an endless void of darkness, a 3-tailed turtle covered in spikes shouted the Mizukage's name repeatedly, but there was no response. Ever since Yagura encountered that masked man, the mindscape had been shrouded in a layer of darkness. From that day on, Isabu had been unable to communicate with its Jinchuriki, Yagura. Or rather, it wasn't that it hadn't tried, it simply couldn't. Isabu felt as though its voice was being blocked by a powerful force. This force was so overwhelming that even as a tailed beast, it couldn't break through it. However, apart from this, the other functions of being a tailed beast to its Jinchuriki remained unaffected. Aisabu could observe everything happening to Yagura, including the monthly visits from the masked man, who seemed to strengthen the force blocking its voice every time. It could also sense that during Yagura's partial tail beast transformations, its chakra was gradually being depleted. At that moment, Aisabu was watching the events unfolding around Yagura. Leading several ninja squads, Yagura had left Hidden Mist Village and was heading toward the attacked port. However, as they approached the port, they were stopped by a stranger. This individual was peculiar. Even though it was clear that Yagura and his group were Hidden Mist Village ninjas, the stranger intentionally stepped out of the shadows and brandished the executioner's blade on their back, as if to say, "Look, I have the blade. Come and get me." According to the rules of Kiri, encountering one of the 7 ninja swords in the wild during a mission was not something to overlook. To be cautious, Yagura ordered the ninja squads to pursue the individual wielding the executioner's blade while he proceeded alone to support the port. Although he was alone, he was a perfect Jinchuriki. His individual combat strength was more than sufficient. But after advancing a short distance, he encountered yet another figure blocking his path. "Yagura, do you still recognize me?" From the shadows of the forest, a tall, imposing figure stepped forward. His heavy voice carried a sense of familiarity for Yagura, though he couldn't immediately place it. "You are Humphrey, you really do have a poor memory. Then perhaps this technique will refresh it." The figure quickly raised a hand and performed a jutsu without forming hand seals. Water style, whale shark bomb jutsu. A torrent of water burst forth like a waterfall, splitting into 2 streams midair. One stream transformed into a massive shark-shaped water bullet, while the other morphed into an even larger whale-shaped water bullet. "This is..." Yagura's eyes widened in shock. He recognized this technique immediately. It was a combination jutsu from the Hoshigaki clan. Known for its S-rank difficulty and immense chakra requirements, it was an exceedingly rare technique that few had ever mastered. During the final round of his fight for the Mizukage position years ago, a Hoshigaki clansman had used this very jutsu against him. Even now, Yagura vividly remembered this technique. Realizing he couldn't confront it in his regular state, he immediately leaped back, dodging the attack while transforming midair into his partial tail beast form. A fiery red chakra cloaked his body, and 3 tails emerged in quick succession, reflecting his serious attitude toward this jutsu. The shark and whale bullets collided with his tail beast cloak. Ice blue and fiery red energies clashed violently, and the 3 fiery red tails danced amidst the chaos of opposing forces. When the attack dissipated, 1/3 of his tail beast cloak was destroyed, revealing parts of his blackened form beneath. The sheer destructive power of this jutsu brought back the memory of the only person capable of using it. Kojiro. Yagura finally recognized the person before him. Back then, he had triumphed over Kojiro's whale shark bomb by mastering partial tailed beast transformation after subduing Aisabu. But now, years later, even the same partial transformation couldn't fully withstand the attack. 1/3 of his tailed beast cloak was shattered by the waves from the attack. Moreover, the resulting shockwave destroyed a massive swath of forest behind him, leaving a colossal, 100-meter-long conical crater in its wake. Have I grown weaker, or has he grown stronger? Fortunately, the tailed beast cloak not only had formidable defensive capabilities but also had the ability to regenerate. Since it was formed from the chakra of a tailed beast, as long as Aisabu continued to provide chakra, the cloak would reform itself. Scarlet chakra bubbled out from his blackened form, surging and reshaping into a new cloak. Watching this unfold, Kojiro remained unperturbed, calmly remarking, "The power of a tailed beast is convenient." Half transformed, Yagura swung his massive 3 tails, letting out an animalistic growl. "You're coming back to the village with me. I doubt you have the ability." With those words, Kojiro flung off his black cloak, revealing a body that began to transform. The once muscular man underwent grotesque changes as his flesh swelled and shifted, transforming him into a monstrous, hulking blue figure. His head turned into that of a whale, his arms morphed into fins lined with razor-sharp scales, and his back bristled with spines like a jagged mountain range. It was almost impossible to imagine how a human could become such a creature, stripped entirely of human traits. Although it seemed as though Yagura was the only one witnessing Kojiro's terrifying transformation, within him, the ancient Aisabu could also see it. Typically, changes in human physiology occurred due to 3 factors: chakra expansion, such as in tailed beast transformations, an excess of natural energy, which caused side effects like sage mode mutations, or genetic modification through biotechnology. However, Aisabu sensed that Kojiro's transformation didn't belong to any of these categories. Instead, his body harbored a deeper, more ancient force, one that surpassed the natural energy and chakra the 3 tails had once sensed in the Sage of 6 Paths. The turtle desperately wanted to warn Yagura about this strange power, but the black barrier imposed by the masked man prevented its voice from reaching him. The two monstrous figures faced each other, one a crimson, turtle-like humanoid, the other a deep blue, green whale-like beast. The two giants charged at each other, colliding in a thunderous battle midway. To counter the disadvantage in size, Yagura forced his partially tailed beast-transformed body to stand upright. His front legs morphed into arms, allowing him to grapple with the taller Kojiro on equal footing. The two were locked in a fierce struggle, resembling sumo wrestlers whose palms pressed together as they pushed with unrelenting force. Although neither moved significantly, the immense power in their arms rippled visibly. Even though Yagura's fiery red turtle-like body didn't display visible muscles, his continuous roars testified to his exertion. Meanwhile, Kojiro's whale-like fins expanded slightly, signaling a growing surge of strength. Initially, Yagura believed his strength could hold its ground. But as the battle continued, he began to feel overwhelmed. Before his eyes, Kojiro's massive whale fins began to force their way through the fiery-tailed beast cloak, inching toward his blackened core. Kojiro's raw physical strength had penetrated the tailed beast cloak. The ground beneath Yagura cracked as his thick turtle limbs were pressed deeper into the earth. Standing at 6 meters tall, he towered over Yagura's 2-meter frame, his massive hands bearing down from above like a hammer driving a nail into wood. Within moments, his legs were pushed into the earth up to his knees. Realizing the futility of competing in raw strength, he decided to retreat and shift tactics. He had 2 trump cards left in his tailed beast arsenal. The first was the coral palm. This technique would cause coral to sprout on anything struck by his tailed beast-enhanced hands, a highly effective counter against physically dominant opponents like Kojiro. However, Kojiro appeared to have anticipated this. From the very beginning, he had engaged Yagura in a grappling contest, holding Yagura's hands in a tight grip. Without the freedom to pull away, Yagura couldn't prepare the chakra needed to activate the coral palm. The second trump card was the tailed beast bomb. With Kojiro locked in a close-range contest, he'd have no way to avoid such an attack. This was Yagura's perfect opportunity. He began forming the tailed beast bomb. The condensed sphere of energy rapidly took shape, aimed at Kojiro's head. Seizing the opportunity, he tightened his grip on Kojiro's hands, using his 3 tails to coil around Kojiro's massive body, anchoring him in place and ensuring he couldn't escape. But Kojiro showed no intention of dodging. Instead, he opened his massive whale-like maw and lunged downward, biting down on both Yagura's turtle-like head and the forming tailed beast bomb. Unbeknownst to Yagura, Kojiro wielded a force beyond chakra, magic. This power, rooted in the mythos of Cthulhu, was a pervasive and ancient energy. Kojiro, alongside entities like the Black Pharaoh and other eldritch deities, was a user of magic. Magic, the second energy to infiltrate the shinobi world after chakra, could only be perceived by beings closely tied to the essence of chakra, such as the tailed beasts, Black Zetsu, or the Sage of 6 Paths. Unlike chakra, magic didn't adhere to numerical values or direct comparisons of strength. It was an expression of ability, operating on principles distinct from those of chakra. The debate of which was superior, chakra or magic, was irrelevant. They were fundamentally incomparable. As one wise elder once said, only magic can defeat magic. Chapter 174, Graduation. Strange Abraham. The sudden action caught Yagura completely off guard. The tailed beast bomb he was about to unleash hadn't fully formed, and the balance between yin and yang chakra was disrupted under the force of the tailed beast chakra. Furthermore, as Kojiro's massive whale-like mouth clamped down on Yagura's semi-transformed maw, the incomplete tailed beast bomb detonated inside Yagura's mouth. Boom. Though this failed tailed beast bomb lacked the power of a fully formed one, the significant amount of yin-yang chakra he had accumulated still packed a destructive punch. The resulting explosion tore apart his tailed beast cloak, revealing his blackened form beneath once more. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Kojiro reached out with one hand and grabbed Yagura by the throat, lifting him off the ground. The immense strength in Kojiro's grip constricted the chakra pathways flowing through Yagura's body, forcibly deactivating the tailed beast cloak below his neck completely. Having already fought him once before, Kojiro was familiar with combating the semi-transformed state and had grown experienced in dealing with it. As for the tailed beast bomb, Yagura may have refrained from using it during the previous battle for fear of its overwhelming power, but Kojiro had learned the countermeasure in advance from the Black Pharaoh. The key was to disrupt the balance of yin-yang chakra before the bomb fully formed. The tailed beast bomb may be destructive, but as long as you don't just stand there and let it form, it's nothing to fear. That was what the Black Pharaoh had said, and Kojiro followed the advice to easily neutralize Yagura's attempt. With his formidable power, prior experience fighting semi-transformed foes, and the Black Pharaoh's guidance, he finally overcame Yagura. The charred black surface of Yagura's body faded away, revealing his youthful, childlike form underneath. Tick. He forced out his final words through a throat increasingly constricted by lack of air, his face twisted with unwillingness and regret. But Kojiro paid no heed to these words. "Oh? That's all for your last words? Then, farewell Yagura." The moment he finished speaking, a crisp sound of a neck snapping echoed through the forest. He flung Yagura's lifeless body to the side, the neck twisted at an unnatural angle. Then his own body began to shrink and weaken, reverting to his original human form. The strength of his transformation as Dagon was immense, but it always left Kojiro exhausted afterward. Not because of the energy consumed during the fight, but because the act of transforming itself was so taxing. Even if he transformed only to crush a cockroach, the fatigue would still be significant. At this moment, a figure emerged from the depths of the forest. It was the Black Pharaoh. Throughout the fight, he had been observing the battle through a projection of himself. By the current standards of the shinobi world, such a fight could be considered spectacular. But as everyone knew, it was the genin of Hidden Lee Village who were truly capable of earth-shattering feats. This was merely child's play. As for the outcome, everything unfolded as he had anticipated. Kojiro's current strength was hard to measure, even for him. Judging from his accomplishments, labeling him as a Super Kage-level ninja would not be an exaggeration. What surprises this world's singularities would bring in the future was difficult for him to predict. However, no matter how powerful Kojiro became, he would remain a pawn in Black Pharaoh's grand scheme for the world, much like Obito was to Madara, or Madara was to Black Zetsu. At that moment, there was another rustling sound in the forest, and Kisame emerged. "All the other ninjas have been dealt with, Dagon-sama," Kisame said, his tone grim yet casual. The team accompanying Yagura had consisted mostly of elite Jonin and special Jonin, but he had wiped out at least 10 of them single-handedly. His strength could not be underestimated. "Let's return to the land of gods for now," Kojiro said. With their mission complete, he and Kisame donned their black robes once again and vanished into the forest in a few swift movements. Despite the battle's end, those two eavesdroppers hadn't left yet. "You're still useful, so I'll let it slide." With a small mental warning, the Black Pharaoh turned his piercing gaze toward the treetops. His imposing aura seemed to radiate dignity and inviolability, and his crimson, gem-like eyes almost pierced through the void to where the cult were hiding. Moments after he vanished, a figure with a green, P-shaped head cautiously emerged from the tree canopy. "That guy noticed us earlier," White Zetsu said in a playful tone. "The aura of authority. I've only felt that from Mother," Black Zetsu murmured in his hoarse, low voice, reflecting on the intense pressure of the glare. With just one glance from the Black Pharaoh into the void, Black Zetsu and White Zetsu were flooded with thoughts and speculations. What's more, Black Zetsu noticed something that White Zetsu couldn't perceive, a mysterious power emanating from both Kojiro and that man. Though this force was indistinct, its presence was there. He couldn't decipher what this power represented, but it left him far more shaken than White Zetsu. "Obito's pawn is dead. Should we inform him? Let's also notify Pain. From now on, the Hidden Mist Village ninjas will no longer be easily manipulated." A few days later, during an Akatsuki meeting, a new member joined the group, carrying a massive, bandaged blade on his back. This ninja was Kisame. "This is Kisame, formerly of Kiri. He's a missing ninja who murdered his superior, Fuki, and is now joining Akatsuki as one of us." Clap. 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 The sparse applause came from a single source, the masked man in the corner, who referred to himself as Akatsuki's intern, Toby. The rest of the members, including even the typically kind-hearted Conan, remained silent and serious, scrutinizing the newcomer with cold expressions. Kisame, however, cracked a slight grin, his fish-like eyes scanning the room. Just as the Black Pharaoh had said, Akatsuki was not a particularly friendly organization. "From today onward, you'll team up with Itachi as a duo," Pain announced. Following his gaze, Kisame located the man named Itachi. Itachi, too, seemed slightly surprised by the new addition, especially the name. "Hoshigaki." Itachi muttered softly. Kisame caught the murmur, and in an instant, he swung his massive blade, Seimata, to rest against Itachi's neck. "What? Do you have a problem with my name?" Kisame growled. "No." Itachi didn't protest further. Having dealt with Hidden Mist Village shinobi before, he was accustomed to their tendency to use blades as a form of emphasis. Before Kisame could lower Seimata, a sharp voice interjected. "Hey! I have a problem with you, and it's a big one." Kisame turned to find a tall, gray-haired young man with a massive scythe slung over his shoulder pointing at him in irritation. "Since you walked in, I've been smelling this disgusting fishy odor coming off you. Can I kill him? Please tell me I can kill him." "Go ahead and try," Kisame retorted, unwrapping the bandages from Seimata. Shinra Tensei. Just as their weapons were about to clash, an invisible force blasted them apart. Kisame and Hidan were flung into opposite walls of the cavern, smashing into the rocky surfaces. Akatsuki does not tolerate infighting. Both Kisame and Hidan crawled out of the rubble, their once neat cloaks now tattered and dirty. First day here, and things are already this lively. Toby quipped leisurely, while the other members of Akatsuki looked on with puzzled expressions. While Akatsuki members were known for their problematic personalities and penchant for conflict, it was unusual for new teammates to clash so violently upon first meeting. Did these two have some kind of history? What kind of grudge could lead to such animosity? Though neither Kisame nor Hidan could explain why, they both found each other unbearably irritating. Yet, under Payne's watchful eye, they begrudgingly sheathed their weapons and moved to opposite corners of the room. Once peace was restored, Payne resumed the meeting. A few days ago, the fourth Mizukage was killed. Because the Jinchuriki was slain, the Three Tails has now been released. It will take several years for it to revive somewhere in this world. Our plan to gather all the tail beasts is currently on hold. Without the Three Tails, the timing is not right to proceed. So I've decided that our next steps will focus on building our reputation, accumulating wealth, and gathering intelligence on the tailed beasts. Once the Three Tails revives, we will resume our plan. That's all. Did you know? You failed your last 2 exams. Tomorrow is the graduation exam, and you're still pulling pranks? Iruka was furiously scolding a mischievous little kid tied up with rope on the classroom floor. The boy, however, turned his head and let out a defiant Humphrey. That troublemaker was none other than Naruto, the class dunce in Iruka's group. Iruka had a love-hate relationship with the boy. When Naruto first joined the ninja academy, he was relatively well-behaved. Though he was a little playful and immature like most kids his age, his overall performance and grades were decent, sometimes even placing him among the top of the class. But at some point, his grades began to plummet, and his behavior grew increasingly unruly. Lately, Naruto had been pulling pranks all over the village, even vandalizing the Hokage rock with graffiti. Iruka didn't understand what had caused such a change. Later, the third Hokage, now retired and serving as an advisor, explained the truth to Iruka. Naruto had lost his parents the moment he was born. Hiruzen, after stepping down from his role as Hokage, often cared for and looked after Naruto. At that time, Naruto genuinely saw Hiruzen as his own grandfather. But after the birth of Hiruzen's biological grandson, Konohamaru, and as he became busier with his duties as an advisor, he began to pay less attention to Naruto. This neglect caused the boy's behavior to grow worse, not out of malice, but as a way to attract the attention of those around him, especially Hiruzen's. As a result, in Naruto's graffiti, Hiruzen's face was always the most exaggeratedly defaced on the Hokage rock. Bright green snot and fiery red hair were standard features in Naruto's artistic pranks on him. In contrast, Naruto never touched the statue of Denzo, the fifth Hokage to the far right. Iruka once asked Naruto why. The response was that Denzo's face looked too scary, and he didn't dare mess with it. Iruka was left speechless. So Hiruzen, who used to care for Naruto, became the main target of his pranks. Scary-looking Denzo. Completely spared. Wasn't that just bullying the nice guy? Still, despite his mischief and Iruka's constant scolding, Iruka always took care of Naruto whenever he got into trouble. He would accompany the boy to apologize to villagers who had been pranked, supervise him or help him clean the paint off the Hokage rock, and frequently have heart-to-heart talks with him. Iruka didn't do this just because Hiruzen had asked him to look out for Naruto. He also saw his own younger self in the boy. As a child, he had been mischievous too. After losing his parents in the Nine Tails attack, he had also resorted to graffiti on the Hokage rock to draw attention to himself. That was one of Iruka's darker, more embarrassing memories. This was why he had a deeper emotional investment in Naruto compared to the other students. But this time, even he had to take things seriously. If Naruto didn't pass tomorrow's graduation exam, he'd face the reality of being held back. That would be no small matter for Naruto's future. Tomorrow's graduation exam, Naruto, you have to give it your all. Looking at Naruto sitting on the floor with a defiant expression, Iruka thought to himself. The graduation exam starts now. When your name is called, go to the next classroom. And this time, the test is on the clone jutsu. Hearing Iruka announce the subject of the exam, Naruto felt like he'd been struck by lightning. Oh no. Why does it have to be the jutsu I'm worst at? Even so, the exam had to be taken. As one classmate after another was called out, leaving with serious expressions and returning with beaming smiles, Naruto's turn finally came. Nervously, he walked into the adjoining classroom, where he spotted a long table. On the table were rows of polished ninja headbands, and his eyes lit up with longing. Behind the table sat the examiners. One was Naruto's homeroom teacher, Iruka. The other was a newer face at the ninja academy, a teacher recently assigned there. Naruto hadn't seen him before, not even around the village. The man's distinctive broom-shaped hairstyle and ever-present sunglasses reminded him of his quiet classmate Shino. Could this new teacher be related to him somehow? The thought amused Naruto, but this was a serious moment, the graduation exam, so he quickly suppressed his smile and formed the hand signs to prepare his jutsu. Clone jutsu. A dramatic surge of blue chakra swirled around Naruto, and with a loud poof, his clone emerged. Next to him, a feeble, lifeless clone lay sprawled on the ground like a dead dog. Such a lackluster performance could only elicit two words in response: you fail. Just as Iruka was about to officially record Naruto's exam results, the other examiner spoke up. Iruka, his physical and athletic abilities are decent, and he did technically manage to perform the clone jutsu this time. Why not let him pass? The suggestion from the new teacher reignited a flicker of hope on Naruto's dejected face. Iruka was surprised and began to ponder the situation. The other examiner was named Aburame Motaki, a teacher who had joined the academy just a month prior. Like Iruka, Motaki held the rank of Chunin. But there were things about him that Iruka found puzzling. Why had he never seen Motaki around the village before? Motaki was older than him, clearly a senior, so why had he only recently started working as a teacher at the academy? Not long after Motaki joined the academy, Hiruzen had a private discussion with Iruka, specifically mentioning Motaki. During that talk, he advised Iruka to keep an eye on Motaki. But why? Now, Motaki's sudden advocacy for Naruto, despite having no apparent personal connection, only added to Iruka's suspicions. Despite the oddity, he remained firm in his decision. Graduating students must be able to create at least 3 clones. Naruto's skills are still far from sufficient. But back when I graduated, the requirement was just 1 clone, Motaki countered. That was during the Third Great Ninja War, wasn't it? At that time, children had to graduate early to fight on the battlefield, so the standards were lower. Now, we're in an era of peace. There's no need for early graduations, and stricter requirements are in their best interest. Ah, I see. With Iruka's greater experience in educational matters, he firmly held the upper hand in the discussion. Motaki nodded in understanding, offering no further arguments. And so, Naruto once again earned the title of dead last, the only student in his class who failed to graduate. Chapter 175, Graduation. Mizuki on the swing set in the Ninja Academy's playground, Naruto sat alone, quietly swinging back and forth. He watched the children being joyfully picked up by their parents. Today was the graduation exam for the senior students at the Ninja Academy. All the parents had come to personally celebrate their children's successful completion of the exam and their advancement to becoming true shinobi. Watching the warm interactions between other families, and hearing the occasional whispers and finger-pointing directed his way, he lowered his head, fiddling with the goggles on his forehead. As he wallowed in his loneliness, a tall figure approached him. Naruto. Hearing someone call his name at a time like this, he quickly lifted his head, filled with hope. Standing beside him was an academy assistant teacher who often chatted with him, his face always carrying a warm smile. Mizuki-sensei. His face lit up with surprise and delight upon seeing him. Naruto, why are you here, sitting on the swing all by yourself? Mizuki leaned casually against the large tree behind him. No one's here to celebrate with me, and I'm the worst in the class. I couldn't even pass the graduation exam. So of course, I'm just here, swinging alone. Finally, having someone willing to talk to him, Naruto poured out all the frustration and sadness he had bottled up. Throughout it all, Mizuki maintained his smile, serving as the perfect listener. When Naruto finally finished venting, he began to speak. Iruka is an orphan, just like you. He's definitely not trying to make things difficult for you on purpose. Maybe he just wants you to become truly strong. But I really want to graduate, Naruto muttered in a dejected tone, idly kicking at the pebbles on the ground with his foot. In that case, you'll just have to work hard and try again at the next graduation exam, Mizuki said lightly. By the way, I wasn't assigned as an invigilator for your exam this time, but if I had been, I would have put in a good word for you. Mizuki's tone was casual and reassuring, but his words reminded Naruto of another teacher, who had spoken up for him during the exam, only for Iruka to ignore it. If Mizuki tried to advocate for him, it probably wouldn't work either, Naruto muttered under his breath. What did you just say? Naruto. Just as Mizuki was about to press Naruto about his murmured comment, another voice interrupted, calling the boy's name. Both Naruto and Mizuki turned toward the source of the voice, only to see the new academy teacher approaching them. Motaki, do you need Naruto for something? Mizuki asked first. Motaki nodded slightly with his expressionless, sunglasses-shrouded face. Yes, I have something to discuss with him. Then, I'll leave Naruto to you. I'll go check on other things. Mizuki didn't try to compete for Naruto's attention and turned to leave, but not before giving the boy a meaningful glance. Naruto instantly recognized the look. Mizuki would sometimes give him this exact signal to meet secretly on a specific rooftop for private chats. Understanding the gesture, he flashed a mischievous grin before standing up to follow Motaki. Leaving the lively school entrance behind, he trailed Motaki back into the academy building. Inside the empty teacher's office, Motaki walked to his desk and pulled over a chair for the boy, seating him across from him. Naruto, initially nervous, thought he might be in trouble, but was surprised to be treated with such respect. "Naruto, what did Mizuki say to you on the playground just now?" His direct question stunned Naruto. Naruto hadn't expected Motaki to summon him so seriously just to ask about his earlier conversation with Mizuki. What a strange habit. People who wear sunglasses really are weird. Out of respect for the quiet and reserved teacher, he recounted his earlier conversation with Mizuki honestly. Of course, he left out the subtle signal Mizuki had given him, something only the two of them could have noticed. After listening to Naruto's account, Motaki nodded in relief. He paused to think for a moment before speaking. "Naruto, the truth is, you've never seen Mizuki's real nature." Naruto looked puzzled. "The reason I say that is because Mizuki and I were in the same cohort. Though we weren't in the same class, I've heard some things about him. He has a unique way of obtaining power, and he's good at achieving success. If you were to seek power from him, you'd likely succeed. But do you know why he is only an assistant teacher and not a formal instructor?" Naruto shook his head, indicating he didn't know. "It's because he once harmed a teammate during a mission. Although it was to complete the objective goal, it cost him the chance to ever become a full-fledged teacher." Naruto nodded absent-mindedly. Got it. Can I leave now?" Motaki's slow and measured way of speaking had completely drained his patience. On top of that, the nature of the explanation had left him bewildered. When Motaki mentioned Mizuki's real nature, he thought he might spill some juicy, embarrassing secrets about Mizuki, like wetting the bed, forgetting toilet paper, or getting scolded for being late to class. But instead, Motaki started talking about Mizuki's methods of gaining power. And as for who was an official teacher versus an assistant teacher, he didn't care in the slightest. However, Motaki's warning had sparked Naruto's curiosity. He now wanted to leave as soon as possible and ask Mizuki about this supposed method of becoming stronger. But just as Naruto's seat was halfway out of the chair, Motaki reached out and pressed a hand on his shoulder, forcing him to sit back down. "Wait, Naruto. I still have more to say." Naruto glanced at the hand on his shoulder. A few small bugs leisurely crawled across Motaki's hand, a sight that sent shivers down Naruto's spine. Too freaked out to resist, Naruto settled back into the chair. "Naruto, the truth is, in this world, ninjas are not the most powerful beings. Human understanding is extremely limited. We are actually living on a small island of the known, surrounded by a vast, dark ocean of the unknown. In that endless ocean, there exists an eternal secret garden. It is a place no human, not even a ninja, has ever set foot in or could set foot in. It's a hall of miracles. A throne of glory. And in that place, there exists an unimaginably powerful being. Its name is..." At this point, Naruto noticed that Motaki's typically calm and steady tone had become labored, his breathing heavier. Motaki tilted his head slightly upward, as if he wasn't even talking to him anymore. The surreal words had once again exhausted Naruto's patience. "Motaki-sensei, what are you even talking about?" he interrupted. Motaki snapped out of his trance-like state, startled. "Nothing. Nothing at all. You may leave now." Under the sunset on the rooftop, Mizuki and Naruto sat at the edge, their legs dangling in the air. "Mizuki-sensei, do you know how to gain power? Who told you about this?" Mizuki looked shocked. He hadn't even begun using his persuasive skills to guide Naruto, yet here the boy was, delivering himself straight to him. "Motaki-sensei told me," Naruto said innocently. Mizuki nodded. Although he didn't know why Motaki would say such a thing, it certainly worked out in his favor. "Power, huh? Actually, Motaki-sensei wasn't wrong. I do know a method to gain power." Hearing this, Naruto immediately put on a pitiful expression and begged, "Mizuki-sensei, please tell me how to gain power. I want to become a strong ninja, just like you." The boy's words brought a bitter smile to Mizuki's face. He couldn't understand why Motaki had claimed he possessed power, as he was far from a powerful ninja. At 27, he was still a Chunin, having been promoted later than most of his peers, with little hope for further advancement. As for power, he didn't even know where to begin. But if he could obtain that thing, he could gain power, and even align himself with someone even stronger. Well, there's no choice. I'll tell you a big secret. In Hidden Leaf Village, there's a certain place where a statue is sealed. This statue contains an incredibly powerful Genjutsu, one so strong that even Jonin cannot resist it. This is a secret very few people in the village know. But now I'm telling you. What's more, I can tell you how to obtain this statue and learn the Genjutsu within. But you have to. As Mizuki spoke, Naruto's eyes grew wider and wider. Late at night, a sneaky orange figure climbed the stairs of the village's shadowed wall and arrived at the entrance of a building constructed against it. Naruto opened the door and entered. Inside the archives library, he found a hidden chamber. Opening the chamber door, Naruto saw it was filled with various items. Most were books and scrolls, but some were objects covered with black cloth, their contents unknown. The statue, the statue. Where is the statue? He anxiously searched through the countless items for the Genjutsu statue Mizuki had mentioned. Though still an academy student and unsure of what Genjutsu really was, he had heard Iruka say it was an advanced form of ninjutsu that few could master. In Naruto's mind, this formed a simple equation. In his mind, mastering Genjutsu is the same as learning advanced ninjutsu. And learning advanced ninjutsu meant becoming awesome. Being awesome, of course, meant everyone would admire him, especially Sakura. With that thought, his imagination ran wild, picturing Sakura clinging to his arm, coyly giggling by his side. And Sasuke could only look up at him with admiration and awe. Ha ha ha, don't be like that, Sakura. There are other students around. Lost in his fantasies, he accidentally kicked something hard. The collision between the tough surface and his exposed toes brought him back to reality with a sharp pain. Ow, ow, ow. Looking down, he found an object about knee-high, covered with a black cloth. Lifting the cloth revealed something that left Naruto utterly stunned. It was a green statue, with the head of a bloated octopus. At that moment, his mind was entirely consumed by the statue. Its image expanded infinitely in his head, and from the statue's form, invisible tendrils seemed to extend, devouring all the pleasant fantasies that had filled his thoughts just moments before. This was a terrifying and eerie statue. In its presence, anything beautiful seemed to wither and decay. Naruto stared blankly at the statue for what felt like an eternity before finally snapping out of it. He hurriedly covered the statue with the black cloth again. So this is the statue Mizuki-sensei mentioned? It's so scary. How could such a statue exist? To Naruto, statues were meant to commemorate beautiful images. Just like the Hokage faces carved on Hidden Leaf Village's mountain wall. Although Naruto often graffitied on them as a prank, he knew the title of Hokage was reserved for the strongest ninjas in the village, heroes who protected Hidden Leaf Village, especially the fourth Hokage. But what was this statue? It looked part octopus, part human, with bat wings sprouting from its back, an outright monster in appearance. Despite his confusion over the statue's form, he decided, after a moment of thought, to take it with him. As soon as he moved the statue, a thick scroll that had been propped behind it rolled onto the ground, freed from the statue's weight. The scroll unrolled naturally as it tumbled, like a roll of toilet paper. Out of habit, he rushed forward to gather it up. While rolling it back, his eyes inadvertently caught sight of the text on the scroll. Mutually multiplying explosive tags. Reanimation jutsu. Multiple shadow clone jutsu. Naruto didn't recognize the other techniques, but when he saw multiple shadow clone jutsu, his eyes went wide. Because if you remove the multiple shadow part, wasn't this the clone jutsu, the one he was worst at? If he could master this technique, wouldn't Iruka finally let him graduate? With that thought in mind, he slung the massive scroll onto his back, grabbed the statue in his arms, and left the building. Since the Uchiha clan's massacre, this forest had become a desolate and rarely visited place. Near an abandoned Uchiha cabin, Naruto sat on the ground, engrossed in the stolen scroll. Beside him lay the statue, still covered by its black cloth. Mizuki had claimed the statue held a powerful Genjutsu. But for some reason, aside from how scary it looked, Naruto hadn't discovered anything particularly useful about it. In contrast, the scroll he had picked up seemed much easier to learn. Within half an hour, he felt he was close to mastering the multiple shadow clone jutsu. Just then, a figure jumped into view and landed in front of Naruto. Looking up, Naruto immediately recognized the person. Mizuki-sensei. Did you find the statue? Right here. Right here. Naruto patted the statue beside him, causing Mizuki to smile in satisfaction. In truth, Mizuki had a reason for sending Naruto to steal the statue. Over the years, he had learned through village intelligence that the Genjutsu statue possessed immense power. A single glance at it was said to trap one in a never-ending illusion, making it an extremely dangerous artifact. By having Naruto steal it, Mizuki avoided any risk to himself. However, seeing the statue now, it didn't seem as mystical as the legends suggested. After all, it hadn't bewitched even a little kid who hadn't graduated from the academy. At that moment, He noticed a large scroll lying open next to Naruto. Curious, he asked, "Naruto, what's this?" "Oh, I found it in the same place as the statue." Naruto's excitement flared as he mentioned the scroll. "Mizuki-sensei. This scroll is amazing. It contains loads of super powerful jutsu. I've already started learning the first one." Mizuki hurriedly approached and picked up the scroll. The moment he saw its contents, his face froze in shock. The scroll of seals? But wasn't it stolen by Orochimaru many years ago?